It all began during the main character Yuta's second year of high school. Finally, he had gathered all his courage to call out his childhood friend and confess, hoping she would agree to go out with him. The girl standing before him was Michiru, who had lived nearby since they were children. Yuta had had a crush on her ever since they were little. Now, a few days before the confession, Yuta had tried asking Michiru if she was free after school. But most of the time, she had plans with friends and would tell him she could make time for him tomorrow. She said that if it was urgent, she could stop by his house later. Yuta replied that tomorrow was fine. Just then, a few students from another class saw Michiru and noticed her because she was so cute. But then they started bad-mouthing Yuta, saying the guy standing there didn't stand a chance with her. Yuta didn't blame anyone for reacting that way, and he figured that if he weren't Michiru's childhood friend, he doubted she would ever even talk to him. Michiru was extremely attractive, athletic, and smart, and was even known as the school's idol. On top of all that, according to Yuta, she was genuinely kind. On the other hand, Yuta wasn't athletic at all, was short, and wasn't a great communicator. The only thing he had going for him was his passion for writing stories. And the only person who would listen to those amateurish adventure stories was Michiru. She used to praise his stories, saying they were really interesting. However, nowadays, whenever he asked if she had time to talk, Michiru would always apologize and say she couldn't. Yuta still thought she was just being kind and considerate of him, so he'd say it was okay. But when he asked if she was free after school, Michiru's friend came over and asked if she was leaving, and Michiru said she had to go and would see him tomorrow. Once again, the naive Yuta just waved goodbye and didn't think much of it. Because he believed it was only thanks to Michiru that he had become the person he was today. Michiru's words had given him the motivation to keep going. But for things to continue, to be able to proudly call her his muse, Yuta needed to confess his feelings to her tomorrow. As Michiru was leaving, she wondered what Yuta wanted to say, since he wasn't acting like his usual self. And she wondered if it was something important. Meanwhile, Yuta was on his way home, walking through a crowd of people. Everyone was going crazy over a series called Digimaz that had recently been adapted into a movie titled Digital Masters: The Movie, Infinite Heaven's Arena, in theaters. Tickets were selling out fast, and the series wasn't just popular with kids but appealed to all ages. The Digimaz novel was something no one wanted to miss, with tons of die-hard fans of the series. And while everyone was excitedly talking about, reading, and watching the series, Yuta was determined to tell Michiru tomorrow. Then he bumped into a suspicious-looking man. Yuta immediately apologized, but the man got angry. His girlfriend told him to just let it go since the kid wasn't worth their time and they needed to hurry so they wouldn't miss the next episode of Digimaz. At the mention of Digimaz, the man quickly left with his girlfriend. Meanwhile, Yuta was reminded of his bad habit of getting lost in his own world. He found it amazing that even people like that couple watch Digimaz. After watching them leave, Yuta thought that having someone by your side must be nice. He recalled the times Michiru would offer various compliments for his stories and always praise his talent, even though he was still an amateur. So at least Michiru saw his worth as a person, and he was sure she would take his feelings seriously. Even if they weren't a perfect match, when he asked her to go out with him, Yuta was confident that things couldn't possibly go wrong. But reality is often cruel and cold. Michiru flatly rejected him, even scoffing at Yuta and asking why on earth she would do that. Yuta stood there, stunned, and she said that she was busy right now. Yuta asked her what she meant by that and tried to talk to her. But Michiru replied that there was a new chapter of Digimaz, and she was excited to read it. Yuta told her she could read it later, and they could talk now, which made Michiru react harshly. She yelled, asking how he could say such a thing about Digimaz, that she had to read it right now, or did he not even know what Digimaz was? Yuta apologized for making her angry, and when Michiru said she couldn't live without Digimaz, Yuta felt sick. He had put his whole heart into that confession, but she was ignoring him to read a new chapter of some novel. After Michiru finished reading, she exclaimed that it was amazing. Yuta felt a wave of relief hearing that, but an unconscious thank you slipped from his lips, which made Michiru wonder what he was thanking her for, leaving Yuta stunned. Michiru then said she was going home. Yuta grew confused and wondered what this was supposed to mean. And when he tried to stop her, she said she still had a Digimas anime episode to watch. Yuta hoped she would think about it more, but Michiru didn't budge, saying that it wouldn't change anything. Besides, her heart now belonged to Digimas, so he didn't stand a chance. Yuta felt like he'd been stabbed in the heart, losing to a web novel. He protested that it was just a novel while he was a real person. Michiru asked what he was even trying to say, claiming that he and the author of Digimas were worlds apart. Yuta wondered what kind of image Michiru had of the Digimas author. She replied it was exactly as she said, that he could never compare to the author of Digimas, Kamimatsu-sama, because he was on a completely different level. Yuta tried to stop her again, asking if this was some kind of joke. Michiru looked offended and asked if he really thought he could compare himself to her Kamimatsu-sama. Yuta was utterly shocked as he asked Michiru if she really didn't realize it. She asked what he was talking about, and Yuta said that the truth was, he was the author of Digimas, Kamimatsu-sama. Michiru glared at him and demanded to know what he just said, asking what kind of desperate lie that was. Yuta insisted he wasn't lying and that Kamimatsu was actually just another way to read the characters in his name. She said that it was just a lucky coincidence and that it obviously wasn't him. She told him to stop it right now because he was tarnishing the sacred name of Kamimatsu, and even though they were friends, that was something she could never forgive. Yuta was stunned and speechless, wondering if she was actually serious. Were all the times she praised Digimas in front of him not because she knew he was the author? Yuta wondered if it was all in his head or if there was a hidden camera somewhere. Michiru said that he didn't have any proof. Yuta quickly realized he needed to prove he was the real Kamimatsu. He fumbled through his bag and pulled out his laptop, saying that this was the original manuscript for the latest chapter of Digimas. But when Michiru looked at it, she accused him of copying it from the web. Even though Yuta tried to explain that it was an original, she didn't believe him and assumed he had prepared it just to deceive her. Michiru asked if he realized that what he was doing only made things worse, as if he were taking advantage of her love for Digimas. To get revenge for her rejecting him, she demanded that he leave and never insult her favorite author like that again. Yuta begged her to stop and swore that he really was Kamimatsu. He took her hand and said he was the one who wrote Digimas, but she slapped him hard and screamed at him to stop immediately. Yuta was heartbroken as she yelled that he wasn't allowed to say that, not even as a joke, because someone like him could never be a best-selling author. She accused him of demeaning himself just to trample on something she loved, and said she was sure Kamimatsu was 1,000 times more handsome and intelligent than him. A saddened Yuta said she didn't have to go that far, but Michiru replied that she wouldn't go easy on anyone who dared to mock Kamimatsu, including him. Yuta tried to speak, but she made it clear that she would never forgive him, and there was no way she could believe he was Kamimatsu. After saying this, she said goodbye and left the classroom, leaving Yuta standing there crying. Yuta cried because he wasn't lying, yet he was being accused. He couldn't understand why things had turned out this way. Michiru's praise about how interesting his stories were was the very reason he'd been able to write such a famous work. It was because of those words that he felt encouraged and achieved the success he had today. But in the end, he was wrong, because that praise wasn't for him but for Digimas. And in Michiru's mind, it had never been his work. Yuta couldn't stop sobbing, catching the attention of some students in the hallway who realized someone was crying in the classroom. They mocked Yuta as he slowly got to his feet, thinking that everything he had ever believed in was just an illusion. He felt like he should just disappear from this world. He got up and walked away, thinking that Michiru was simply a fan of Digimas and Kamimatsu. In his anger, despair, and self-pity, his heart was filled with pain, especially after she had screamed at him like that. Yuta felt tired and sick of everything. He took out his phone and looked at the feedback for the latest chapter. He posted an article with the title, "Walking My Own Path." Yuta slowly looked up and sighed. wondering if there was any reason to keep writing anymore. He felt that maybe he should just give up, since nothing had any meaning now. He had thought Michiru always supported him, and that's what gave him the motivation to write. But now he had no reason to continue, and it would be insane to keep going after what she'd said. If he didn't quit, he wouldn't be able to move on. So, Yuta decided to end his role as Kamimatsu and give up. He posted an announcement on the Become a Novelist app that Kamimatsu's duty was over and he was officially retiring. The moment the retirement notice was posted, the entire world was in shock, as it was a huge blow. Even Yuta's editor, Mei, was shocked by this sudden decision. Even some famous celebrities couldn't accept the news, and the Digima's fan community erupted in chaos, grieving the announcement. Michiru, the one who caused it all, also cried when she read the notice from Kamimatsu. Grief and shock spread throughout the Digima's fan community. Meanwhile, Yuta smiled sadly, feeling bitter that this was the end of Digimas. But he also felt a sense of liberation. He figured it was enough, since his work had already gotten an anime and a movie adaptation. Suddenly, he received a call from his editor, Sakudira Mei. He answered and said good evening, but she loudly demanded to know where he was. Yuta replied that he was on his way home, and she immediately declared she would be at his house as soon as possible, then hung up. Yuta was confused about what was going on, but regardless, he believed it was all over as he stepped into his house. However, as soon as he arrived, before he could even take off his shoes, his mother and sister ran up and threw their arms around him, and his mother asked why he had announced his retirement, while his sister asked the same thing, wondering if he was being bullied or something. Yuta replied that wasn't it and asked why they were so worried. Utako said they couldn't be blamed and showed him the news about his retirement. Yuta's mother asked who had caused this so she could have a word with them. Yuta said that he wasn't being bullied and was truly okay, which relieved everyone a little, but Yuta still had to face their questioning. His mother had him sit down and asked for the reason he wanted to quit, with both her and Utako sitting beside him, pressuring him for the truth. Yuta said that he had lost his motivation to write, and his mom asked if it was writer's block, where an author can't think of how to continue a story. Yuta replied that it wasn't that, he simply wanted to quit. Utako asked why and desperately begged him to continue. Utako fell silent, and their mother, sensing something was wrong, told Utako to be quiet and then hugged Yuta to comfort him. He asked if his mom was going to ask any more questions, and she replied that she wouldn't, because while she loved his work, she loved him 100 times more. She asked Utako if she loved her brother that much too. Utako also fell silent before hugging Yuta tightly, saying she would respect his decision if that's what he had decided. Yuta felt that this warmth from his family was second to none, and he burst into tears in their arms. Then Yuta's father suddenly burst into the house, panting, and hugged him, and asked why he had decided to quit. He said that he couldn't just give up like this because if he did, he, the deputy editor-in-chief, would definitely be fired. He said that Yuta was the company's treasure, so he didn't want Yuta to stop writing. Yuta tried to ask his father to stop. His mother grabbed her husband by the collar, and when he turned around, she had a terrifying expression like an angry demon, asking him why he was pressuring their son. Yuta's father quickly apologized and sat down properly, while Yuta and Utako wondered why their dad looked so pathetic. While his mother was scolding his father, someone arrived on a motorcycle and walked into Yuta's house as if it were routine, announcing for the deputy editor-in-chief to leave this to her. She apologized for entering so suddenly, and everyone realized who she was. She called Yuta sensei because she was, in fact, his editor, Sakudira Mei. Yuta wasn't too surprised to see Mei there, so she told him to get on the motorcycle. Yuta went outside and saw there was indeed a motorcycle. Wondering what was going on, she took his hand and said that he had to come with her. While he tried to tell her to wait, Mei told his parents that she was just borrowing Yuta. When his father tried to ask what she was doing, Mei replied that she was carrying out a company mission and couldn't trust Yuta's father to handle this himself. She'd been assigned to help Yuta get through this difficult time. Yuta's family thought that was a bit much, but they let Mei borrow him. She handed Yuta a helmet and told him to hold on tight. Yuta felt a little awkward being told to hold on to a grown woman like her. But since she said it like an order, he held on to her. With that, Mei started the engine and sped off, leaving Yuta's family watching. Yuta noticed her hair smelled nice, and then thought this wasn't something he should be thinking about right after being rejected. But he couldn't help it because, thanks to everyone's kindness, he didn't feel so bad anymore. Mei took Yuta to a restaurant and apologized, saying it was the only place she could book on such short notice. Yuta said it was fine and asked why the restaurant was so empty. Mei replied that she had booked the entire restaurant so they could talk freely. Yuta asked how she could afford to do that, and Mei mentioned that the company was willing to pay because they would do anything to keep Yuta, as his Digimas series was a successful novel that made the company a lot of money. Yuta asked if that was something she should be telling him. Mei then changed the subject and told him to sit at the table and eat whatever he wanted. There was also meat on the table, and she said it was her family's motto, to eat meat when you're sad. Yuta realized why she was doing all of this. Then she invited him to try some of the dishes. She also took a few bites and remarked that the food was delicious even without sauce, almost on a different level. Hearing the phrase, a different level, Yuta felt a pang in his heart as it reminded him of Michiru saying the same thing. Mei noticed he was sad and asked what was wrong since he was barely eating. She asked if he had just had his heart broken by a girl. Hearing this, Yuta spilled his drink and asked how she knew. Mei laughed and said she guessed right thanks to her woman's intuition. But she asked how it happened since he wasn't dating anyone. Yuta slowly opened up, saying his feelings were one-sided, and he had trouble continuing his story. Mei asked if he wanted to talk about it, and Yuta looked at her with a worried expression. Normally, Yuta would hate it when people pried, especially about embarrassing stories like this, but he also knew there were times when it was better to open up. Here, after seeing the calm demeanor and reassuring kindness of a mature woman like Mei, he felt like letting his guard down a little. So he opened up and told her everything, including being rejected by his childhood friend and, in his despair, announcing his retirement. Mei put down her teacup and said she was glad that at least Yuta wasn't retiring because of the characters in his novels. Yuta insisted that could never happen because it was his work, but he still saw no reason to continue writing. She realized how important that was. And from what she'd heard, his childhood friend was the reason he wrote, but Mei tried to explain that every author has a certain responsibility. Yuta didn't understand what she meant until she described that he had breathed life into the characters in his story. So he had a responsibility to see the story to its end. She said this not as his managing editor, but as a fan who loved the characters. Mei then asked him to check the news about his retirement announcement. Yuta was surprised since it had only been a few hours since he posted it, and she said that just showed how influential his story had become. She asked him to check his social media, and when Yuta opened his phone, he was stunned to see the hundreds of thousands of likes and comments he had received, along with thousands of people grieving over his retirement announcement. Mei told him to look at the comments on the novel writing platform. Yuta felt embarrassed, but was impressed by the sheer volume of responses. Mei helped him understand that everyone loved the characters he had breathed life into. Yuta began to realize she was right. That Digimas was his brainchild. Through those responses, he saw how many people were looking forward to seeing that child continue to grow. They said that maybe he was going through a tough time, but asked if he felt sorry for the readers who had grown to love Digimas and its characters. Mei took out an action figure of the main character and acted it out, saying he hadn't had enough adventures yet. Mei apologized if it seemed silly, but Yuta understood the message. He admitted that announcing his retirement was too hasty. Yuta realized he had too many readers waiting for him, and giving up would be irresponsible to them and the characters. Mei didn't force him, saying the decision was still his if he wanted to quit. However, she didn't want him to betray his readers or his characters. Yuta realized he had been selfish and decided to continue writing. He would do it for the readers who loved his work and for the characters themselves. And in the end, Michiru's rejection of him stemmed from his own misunderstanding. He also understood that her praise had nothing to do with his work. Anyway, the reason he kept writing was because he loved creating stories. Now, he decided to continue writing for the readers who loved his work and for the characters who lived within it. Mei was delighted by his comeback, and Yuta thanked her for everything she'd done. She replied that it was nothing, as long as the matter was resolved. Yuta understood he needed to retract his retirement announcement. They agreed he should do it. But first, Mei wanted to enjoy herself a bit more on the company's dime, so she asked the waiter to bring some red wine. And so, after his childhood friend told him he could never become a best-selling author and hurled other insults, Yuta was somehow able to start writing again with newfound motivation. Meanwhile, Michiru had a realization of her own. For now, she was just happy to know Kamimatsu wouldn't actually be retiring, but wondered why Kamimatsu-sama would say such a thing in the first place. She thought he must have gone through some kind of traumatic experience, recalling Yuta's claim that he was Kamimatsu, the author of Digimas. And Michiru had reacted harshly, insulting him by saying he could never become a best-selling author. She shook her head, thinking there was no way Uta could be Kamimatsu. But she didn't know that one day she would realize she'd let a big one get away. She felt silly even thinking about it, as there was no way he could write such a delicate story. But one day she might have to beg him for forgiveness in tears. Meanwhile, Kamimatsu's return had a positive impact on many fans, including celebrities. They were all thrilled to know the work wasn't canceled and that they would get to read more. After announcing the retraction of his retirement, Yuta was on his way home from the restaurant. Apparently, Mei had been drinking non-stop as if there were no tomorrow, and now she and he had to take the train home because she couldn't ride her scooter. Yuta sat quietly while Mei checked people's reactions and showed him that his comeback announcement had received double the comments of his retirement post. Yuta agreed, and Mei called him a celebrity. He admitted that he was only now realizing he'd been ignoring the people who loved his work. Mei smiled and counted herself among them, saying she really liked him a lot. Hearing that, his heart beat faster, and he said it was embarrassing to hear that directly. Mei corrected herself to explain that she loved his work, which made Yuta genuinely happy. Podcast to know she felt that way about his novel. Mei sighed after a moment of silence and said she was glad she could finally do something, helping to lift a burden from her shoulders. Yuta remembered that she was still his managing editor, and if he had actually decided to retire, she would have lost her job. He apologized to her for not thinking about the consequences. Mei reassured Yuta that she didn't mean it like that. She explained that these days, the relationship between an editor and an author is often just business, until the author no longer needs an editor. Yuta said she was very helpful, but Mei replied that she didn't need his pity. She just wanted him to understand her feelings and what she could do for him. She believed she would always be the #1 fan of his work. It was the first time Yuta had seen this expression on Mei's face, as she was usually so composed. In his eyes, this made her more beautiful than ever. She added that she had witnessed Yuta's dedication firsthand and knew just how much time and effort he put into his work. She knew it better than anyone because she was his biggest fan. Yuta was a little flustered, not knowing how to respond. Mei continued, saying it was her job to be the one who understood him best. Because working with Yuta was the best thing that had ever happened in her life, she hoped he would let her stay by his side, no matter how embarrassing it might get. She wanted to be a partner to Digimas, or to him for life. This made Yuta incredibly happy, sensing that Mei didn't just want to work with him as an editor, but as a life partner. Mei truly understood and supported him, and Yuta agreed to continue their partnership, feeling grateful to have Mei as his editor. Mei was also happy and looking forward to it. She let out a sigh of relief and then suddenly said she felt a little jealous of Yuta's childhood friend. Yuta didn't understand why she'd say that. Mei mentioned how Yuta, the author who had shaken the world with his work, wrote stories just to get praise from his childhood friend. She said that was enough to make any girl's heart flutter. Yuta thought that might be true, but in reality, he was treated completely differently. He was still upset knowing that Michiru didn't even realize he was the author and refused to believe him. In her eyes, he was just a childhood friend, nothing like her perfect image of Kamimatsu. Mei apologized for bringing it up again, but Yuta said it was fine, and that thanks to her, he was able to get over it. Mei called him a dummy as she leaned in close and called him sensei. Yuta was completely flustered by how close she was and asked if he wanted to go on a date. Yuta could see her and feel her hands getting closer, which felt strange to him since they were already so close. Mei said she felt really warm right now, and Yuta intentionally pretended not to understand, asking if something was wrong. Mei said she couldn't hold back anymore, and Yuta replied that he didn't know what she meant and that everything was too sudden. They were on the train, with Mei still leaning against him. When he asked if she heard him, Mei just laughed and said maybe they really should go on a date. Yuta felt her move even closer, and his mind started to race. Mei said she realized he used to have his eye on someone else, but now that he'd been rejected, there was nothing between them anymore. So she suggested they should date. Yuta replied that he didn't want to, and asked why she'd choose him. Mei said he was rich, famous, and had a bright future. Finally, she pulled him closer and kissed his cheek, telling him he was so cute, leaving Yuta stunned and caught off guard. He knew she was only doing this because she was completely drunk. Someone on the train told Yuta and Mei to get a room instead of acting like that here. Mei was starting to cause a scene on the train. The train was approaching station number 3, which was Yuta's stop, and he thanked Mei for everything, dashing out as soon as the doors opened. He texted her to be careful on her way home. In the end, he felt glad that she was his editor and thought they really were a good team. Mei told him that his sincerity was what drew so many girls to him. Before she left a message saying she was serious about what she'd said. Yuta experienced a moment of intense embarrassment and knew that being drunk wasn't an excuse for her behavior, especially when she got so close. But perhaps, he thought, she was just trying to cheer him up, and he felt grateful that everyone was so kind. Yuta remembered how his mother, his sister Utako, and Mei's kindness had all helped heal his broken heart. It wasn't just them, but also the passionate fans waiting for his next work. Now Yuta decided to do just that and went home to write the next chapter of Digimaz. Yuta felt invigorated as he wrote, for all his readers and for all the characters living within his story. Mei got home safely, and Yuta also went home, sleeping after finishing a chapter. The next morning, he woke up to find his little sister crying with joy as she sat by his bed. When she saw he was awake, she wished him a good morning. Yuta asked what was wrong, and she replied that she had just read the chapter he posted last night, and it had moved her deeply. Yuta remembered again that his whole family were fans of Digimaz too. Utako said that the chapter had gotten a ton of views even though he posted it late at night, which proved everyone was waiting for his return. She thanked him so much and said she hoped he would never stop writing. Yuta also apologized for making her worry. She thanked him for blessing them with a new chapter and said she was proud to be the little sister of someone who could write such wonderful things. Yuta thanked his sister, and they went to have breakfast together. There, his father immediately greeted Yuta with teary eyes. His dad thanked Yuta for not giving up, adding that now he wouldn't lose his job either. He proudly declared that Yuta was the family's savior. Then his mother told his father to stop clinging to Yuta and wished him a good morning. She told the father to be more serious about supporting the family, even if Yuta were to stop writing, and pointed out that the only reason he still had a job was because he was Yuta's father. That stung his dad, but the truth was the truth. Yuta just laughed it off since it was just another normal day. His mother hugged him, happy that he was feeling better. She told him not to worry about everything, and that if he really wanted to stop, he could. Yuta worriedly asked his mom if she was sure his dad could provide for the family, and she replied that they would manage somehow, since she was the one who handled the finances. She added that he didn't need to worry and should just do what he wanted. as long as he didn't forget about his studies. Because he was still a high school student like everyone else, even if someone had high expectations for him, Yuta could just ignore them. Because as his mother, she wanted him to have a normal life. The more he forced himself to do something he didn't want to, the more he would make her worry. Utako felt the same way, as she didn't want to see her brother looking so sad. Yuta was moved by his family's warmth and affection and thanked them, saying that he really did want to continue writing. His clingy father thanked Yuta for his decision, and then the whole family ate breakfast together. While they were eating, the TV showed a news report about the author of Digimon retracting his retirement announcement, which caused fans to explode with passionate reactions. Yuta's mother remarked that every channel was talking about it. Yuta thought that was probably pretty normal, but his father pointed out that Digimon was a massive franchise that had sold a huge number of print copies, anime Blu-rays, and now even had a movie with a box office revenue of 50 billion yen. Yuta, stunned, asked when it had earned that much. His father reminded him that there was a party coming up to celebrate this achievement and asked if he wanted to go. Yuta didn't know anything about the party, and his father had asked Sakudai Mei to tell him about it. Regardless, he took out the party invitation and gave it to Yuta, which listed the venue as the Royal Hyatt in Shinjuku. Utako exclaimed in amazement that it was a first-class hotel next to the Tokyo Metropolitan Government Building. And based on the location, it seemed like they were really going all out for the party. Yuta's father said they had booked the entire hotel, which just showed how much money Yuta's movie had made. His family was very supportive and praised Yuta, making him feel happy and relieved. His father asked if he would be attending, and Yuta wondered if he should go. His mother mentioned that Yuta had never attended events like this before and asked if it was necessary for him to go. His sister agreed since Yuta was trying to hide his identity. Yuta considered that hiding his identity was one thing, but the bigger reason was that there would definitely be a lot of girls there. Before, he would have felt like he was betraying Michiru, but now he knew that was all in his head and he had gotten carried away. Yuta looked conflicted, and his father said that in that case, he would inform the organizers that Kamimatsu couldn't attend. Yuta stopped his father and said that he actually wanted to go, surprising his father with the unexpected answer. Yuta had made up his mind, since Michiru was no longer a concern and this would help him get over her. His father agreed and promised to let everyone know, assuring him that the event would be very interesting for him. He also added that there would be many new faces, like the director and the famous superstar Komagane Yuri. Along with the cast, Yuta's little sister excitedly asked if Yuri was the voice actress for the main character, Ryo, in Digimon, and Yuta's father agreed, saying she's a beautiful and famous high school voice actress. Yuta remembered hearing her name on one of the audition tapes for the anime, and her voice had left a deep impression on him. Yuta's father was very excited about this, and his mother asked if he was planning to use Yuta to get an autograph from the voice actress. She called him pathetic for it. Yuta realized this would be his first big party anyway, and he was excited. Utako then checked her phone and saw a picture of Yuri, realizing that she was indeed very beautiful. Meanwhile, Yuta was sure that this party would be the start of a new chapter in his life. When it was time to leave for the party, Yuta put on a brand new suit and went with his father to a hotel in Shinjuku for the celebration party with the Digimon production team. But he still felt nervous. When they arrived at the hotel entrance, his father assured him he would show him around the venue and told him to just try and keep up. But just a few minutes later, Yuta found himself lost, as even his father didn't know the way, and they couldn't find the entrance despite looking around. His father decided to ask someone for directions and told him to wait there while he went to find out. Yuta thought he should have seen this coming, since his father was acting like he owned the place. Now, he had been waiting for 10 minutes, but the situation hadn't improved. He wondered if he should just try to find the way himself. Then, a girl's voice greeted Yuta, and when he turned around, he saw a beautiful girl in a party dress. her gentleness showing in the way she asked him if something was wrong. Yuta's confidence evaporated the moment she appeared before him, and he couldn't deny her charm. She was so beautiful it left him speechless, and she spoke to him so gently. However, Yuta felt so nervous that he stammered, asking if she was talking to him. He couldn't hide his bewilderment and thought she would surely laugh at him, especially when she raised a hand to cover her slight smile. Yuta had always been considered someone with poor communication skills, and he guessed it was happening all over again. He was a little disappointed, but then she answered naturally that yes, she was talking to him. Yuta was surprised she wasn't making fun of him. Then she asked if he was here for the Digimus party. Yuta agreed and asked if she was here for the same reason, and she said yes, telling him not to be so tense around her. She thought they might be the same age, so she asked if he was in high school. Yuta replied that he was a second year, and she confirmed it was the same for her, telling him to be more comfortable. Yuta felt she looked very mature even though they were the same age. She said it was great to have someone her own age at events like this. Yuta said he felt the same way. Then she asked if he was lost too. Yuta nodded in agreement, though admitting it was quite embarrassing, and mentioned that his father was supposed to come back for him. The girl laughed, since that made both of them lost together. She asked if it was okay to stay with him until his father returned, and Yuta didn't mind at all. However, the atmosphere turned awkward as they both stood there in silence. And Yuta wished he could start a conversation naturally to keep her from getting bored. He noticed she looked even more beautiful up close. Then she asked for his name and introduced herself as Yuri. She said she didn't mind if he called her by her first name. Yuta was amazed by how cute she was, like an angel, and she was so skilled at conversation. Yuta said he wouldn't dare be so disrespectful as to call her by her first name so casually, which made her laugh and praise him for being quite funny. Yuta thought she was thinking way ahead of him. Then he felt the name Yuri sounded familiar. Yuri said he could try calling her by her first name, and told him not to worry since they were the same age. Then she asked what brought him here, since he must be involved with Digimus if he was at the party. Yuta thought he shouldn't just come out and say he was the author, as it had become a trauma for him after how Michiru treated him. He thought maybe she would believe him since she was so kind. Yuri thought she might have asked something too personal and told him he didn't have to answer if he didn't want to. Yuta apologized and asked that if she was here, she must know a lot about Digimon. Yuri replied with a surprised look, saying she didn't just know it, she was its biggest fan. Yuta had never seen such a beautiful smile before, as she continued, saying she'd been a fan since the very first chapter was posted. Yuta was surprised to learn she'd been a fan for that long, and asked what she liked most about the story. Her eyes sparkled as she asked if he was sure he wanted to know, because the list would be very long. Yuta agreed that it was fine. She began talking about Digimon, starting with the charming characters, especially the protagonist, Ryo. Yuta noticed her face light up with enthusiasm, and she went on to list everything she loved about Digimon. She had clearly read every chapter, from the first to the latest, and he was certain she was a huge fan of the series. It made him very happy to meet such a passionate fan who wasn't Mei or a member of his family. Then she paused and apologized for rambling on for so long, thinking he must be scared off. Yuta replied that he wasn't scared at all, and was very happy to hear how much he loved Digimon. She wondered why he was happy, and Yuta was flustered, not knowing what to say next. He said that he was sure the author would be very happy to know they had such a dedicated fan like her. Yuri agreed, thinking it would be wonderful if the author were here. She asked if he liked Digimon, and Yuta agreed he did. Then she asked what he liked about the story. They both started talking about Digimon for a long time, and it felt as if time stood still while they talked. They had a lot of fun, and it was as if they had known each other for years. At least, that's how it felt to Yuta. She praised him and said that she was proud to be a longtime fan, but after listening to him, she realized he knew even more about Digimon than she did. That surprised her a little, as she didn't expect him to have such deep knowledge. Yuta thanked her, knowing she was right, since he was actually the author, but he felt like he was cheating a little. At this point, Yuri stood up and said she was very happy to have met another big fan and had never met anyone like him before. She said she didn't have anyone she could open up to about her love for Digimons like this, and she was very glad she got lost in the hotel today. Yuta's heart beat faster seeing her warm smile. Then she said she had voiced the role to make fans like Yuta happy. When she mentioned this, Yuta asked if she was a voice actress. Yuri nodded and said she was still just a rookie. Yuta pieced the details together, a beautiful high school voice actress, and realized Yuri was Komagana Yuri, the voice of Ryo, the main character of Digimons. He remembered the name and to confirm asked her if she was the one who voiced Ryo. Yuri confirmed that it was her. Yuta expressed how amazing that was, adding that his sister had mentioned her as a super famous and super beautiful high school voice actress. She smiled, thanking him for the compliment, but said she wasn't that good and was just getting started. Yuta was impressed that she was so humble despite being so famous, and that he had just had a normal conversation with a celebrity. Yuri shared that when the anime was announced, she practiced day and night to make her voice worthy of a Kamimatsu character. When he heard her call him sir, Yuta felt like he had aged. Yuri said it would be rude not to add sir before a great person like him. But now Yuta thought he was the one being rude for not recognizing her as a big star. Yuri then asked if she could have his contact information, and he asked in surprise why, thinking it was because he was the author. But he knew she had no idea he was the author from the start, which made him wonder why she wanted his contact info. She replied that she really wanted to talk more about Digimons, since they hadn't gotten to talk much today, and it had been really fun. She found Yuta to be a wonderful guy and wanted to get to know him better. Yuta recognized the signs that she was interested in him for who he was. He replied that he would love to talk with her more too, which made Yuri break into a radiant smile, and they exchanged contact information. Yuta felt happy seeing that she genuinely seemed to understand him. Just then, his father called out Yuta's name loudly. Yuta asked his father what took him so long, and he apologized, saying they should get going because they couldn't have the author be late. Yuri let out a loud, "What?" while his father was stunned to realize she was there. Yuri asked if she had heard correctly that Yuta was called the author. Yuta's father became incredibly excited and happy to meet Yuri in person, saying it was wonderful to meet her. Meanwhile, Yuri was shocked and embarrassed by Yuta's father's behavior. Yuta's father introduced himself as Agemasu Shoji, Kimamatsu's father, and thanked her for giving his son such great experiences. Yuri pulled her hand back and turned to Yuta, saying she had a question. She asked if he was the author, Kimamatsu, and Yuta admitted that he was, feeling guilty inside. Yuri was immediately so shocked and stunned that she was paralyzed with surprise. Yuta apologized, explaining that he didn't know how to tell her, but his words didn't reach Yuri, as she was so surprised she fainted on the spot. They quickly rushed to help her and tried to wake her up. This was Yuta's first time meeting the beautiful high school student Yuri in person. Meanwhile, Yuri felt so utterly fulfilled at the chance to speak with Kamimatsu-sama that she could die happy right then and there. Yuta's father quickly took her to the infirmary. While this chaos was unfolding, another famous star had arrived at the venue and stopped when she heard someone say Kimamatsu-san. She didn't think the author Kimamatsu would actually be here, since he had never made an appearance before. After finding out his identity, Yuri fainted, and his father took her to the infirmary. As he left, his father left Yuta with someone who would guide him to the event, and a note saying he would be appearing on stage as a surprise guest. Yuta was shocked to hear this, as he hadn't been told beforehand, but his father had already rushed off. The guide led Yuta to the side of the stage. The host began with a greeting and thanked everyone for attending the ceremony celebrating the movie Digital Masters Infinite Heavens Arena, reaching 50 billion yen in box office revenue. Yuta's guide was eagerly waiting for his turn to appear, while Yuta was terrified seeing so many people who were involved in making the movie. The excitement made him uncomfortable, as he's naturally shy at these kinds of events. From Yuta's perspective, everyone here was shining in their fancy outfits, while he felt out of place and inadequate. putting himself in an awkward position. Just then, the film's director, Makoto, stepped onto the stage and started with a few jokes to lighten the mood. A moment later, she got straight to the point, saying the movie's success was thanks to the greatness of Digimas and the efforts of everyone here. Suddenly, Yuta realized Makoto was actually a woman, whereas he had assumed she was a man because of her powerful way of speaking. Director Makoto announced the start of the ceremony, and everyone raised their glasses in a toast with her. This made Yuta happy because everyone was celebrating Digimas. Then Makoto told everyone that they had a special guest today. People wondered who this special guest could be, and Yuta thought she was talking about him. So he tried to stay calm so he wouldn't embarrass himself. But then she asked everyone to give a round of applause for the special guest, none other than Alyssa. Yuta was taken aback, realizing there were other special guests besides him. Alyssa was a beautiful girl who was scheduled to perform. Yuta recognized that he'd heard her name before. The audience began to applaud and cheer for Alyssa. She introduced herself as Alyssa Seba. And Yuta remembered that she was the one who sang the opening theme for the Digimas anime. Despite only being active for about 2 years, she was already famous and had appeared on many hit music shows. In addition to her accomplishments, Alyssa was tall with a stunning figure, easily able to become a supermodel with her beauty. Yuta could tell she was beautiful even from this distance. She began to sing on stage, and her voice was incredible as she performed the ending theme from the Digimas movie. It truly captured many hearts. And Yuta also loved her voice. He could hardly believe that someone so amazing sang for Digimas, and not just her, but everyone in this hall had contributed to making Digimas what it is today. When the song ended, everyone praised her for her excellent performance, and she thanked everyone for their support. Everyone was happy and even moved, feeling grateful to be there, with some even deciding to brag about this to their friends. Alyssa thanked the director and said that taking all the credit wasn't her style. Since everyone had contributed, Director Makoto said that none of this would have been possible without Digimas. And after she agreed, Makoto winked, saying she wanted to invite another special guest to the stage. Then, she called a sensei to the stage. At this point, Yuta understood that this was definitely his cue. Pushing aside his anxiety, he walked onto the stage. People wondered who this high school student was. But when some realized the director had called him sensei, they started to put it together. And just then, the director herself said that this was probably the first time everyone was seeing this person, because this was the real author of Digimas, Kimamatsu Sensei. Alyssa and everyone in the crowd fell silent at this sudden revelation of Kimamatsu's true identity. This silence made Yuta think he didn't belong here, but he was proven wrong when the crowd erupted in excitement, cheering that Kimamatsu was really here. They couldn't believe someone so young could create such a famous work. It was incredible. The director said that everyone must be very surprised because Alyssa was supposed to be the only special guest. But Makoto himself was surprised when Kimamatsu-sensei accepted the invitation. She approached Yuta, bowing to show her respect and thanked him as the director of the film, and also thanked him from the bottom of her heart for allowing her to work on his wonderful creation. Alyssa also stepped forward and said it was an honor to meet Kimamatsu-sensei, formally introducing herself and expressing her pride in meeting him. Yuta didn't know how to react when people treated him so formally. Then he noticed Alyssa was trembling slightly and wondered if she was okay, and a single one of her tears fell to the floor. It turned out she was actually crying. Makoto asked why she was crying, and Alyssa apologized, but explained that she had always been waiting for the day she would meet her beloved Kimamatsu-sensei. Yuta was completely taken aback and didn't understand what she meant by the beloved part. Director Makoto said that Alyssa was truly his biggest fan, which also made Yuta think of Yuri, who was also a huge fan of his. Makoto explained that when Alyssa heard about the anime project, she immediately called and said she had written a song offering to use it as the anime's theme song. Yuta asked if that was true, and Alyssa nodded in agreement, saying that Yuta had moved her to her very core with his wonderful story. And when she first read the story, her heart fluttered like never before, and tears of joy fell. Before she knew it, she had started writing a song. Kimamatsu was the first person to make her feel that way. Director Makoto said that they didn't even have to pay her to write the song, as she had composed it herself with all her passion for Digimas. Yuta was touched to hear that she wrote the song just for her love of Digimas. Then, Alyssa moved closer and said that his work had changed her whole world. Not just her career, but her entire life had become brighter because of him. She had always dreamed of being able to express her gratitude to him and said she wouldn't be where she is today if it weren't for him. She placed his hand on her chest and asked if he could feel her emotions. But he just wanted to scream that she couldn't possibly feel his own confused emotions because she didn't know. Alyssa said that as a writer and creator, she respected him more than anyone in the world. Yuta felt every word she said, as they both knew the feeling of moving others with their words. Yuta was moved by the thought that another creator could love and be so deeply influenced by his work. So he told Alyssa that he also greatly respected her as a creator. In all of her songs, her passionate heart and brilliance moved him to tears every time he listened. Alyssa was mesmerized to hear him say that. Then she called his name and suddenly threw her arms around him, sincerely thanking him for the compliment. But her embrace was so intense that Yuta couldn't understand what was happening. Alyssa said she had longed to meet him for so long. And now that she had, he had bestowed such kind words upon her, which made her incredibly happy. Yuta gradually realized that the way Michiru had treated him before was terrible. But Alyssa and Yuri weren't affected at all. They accepted him for who he was. Yuta said he was very grateful to her, and that her compliments also made him very happy. Hearing that, Alyssa became flustered, and Yuta added that it was an honor to have someone love his work so much that they wrote a song for it. He affirmed that both he and Digimas were lucky to have met someone as wonderful as her, and that made Alyssa so happy that she confessed her feelings for Yuta. Immediately, Alyssa proposed to him, moved closer to Yuta, and then kissed him in front of the entire team. After the kiss, she became shy, while Yuta was almost drained of all emotion. Everyone was in shock watching this live confession. Alyssa said that this meeting had made her realize that Yuta was even more wonderful than she had ever dreamed, and that he was everything she needed. She repeated that she loved him very much and asked if he would go out with her. That was the first time Yuta had met the super famous singer, Alyssa Seba, and also the first time he had ever received a confession of love. Just then, director Makoto reminded Alyssa that she was on stage, and when she realized it, Alyssa became extremely embarrassed. Director Makoto asked what Kimamatsu-sensei thought about this, adding that from the look on his face, this was probably too much for a high school student. Meanwhile, in the infirmary, Yuri woke up in a panic, and Yuta's father said he was glad to see she was okay. Yuri asked where she was and where Yuta was. Yuta's father replied that he was probably enjoying the party while they were in the infirmary. Yuri's heart was pounding, just like Alyssa's. Before long, these two girls were about to become rivals in love. The Digimas celebration party had begun with something Yuta never expected: a confession of love and a kiss from a super famous singer. Afterwards, he couldn't calm down for a while, as it was hard to believe that someone so beautiful had kissed him. Even though it was only for a brief moment, her lips were very soft, so much so that Yuta thought for a second that this might all just be a dream. Soon, Alyssa brought a plate of food over to Yuta and told him to eat something. Yuta thanked her for going to the trouble, and she said it was no bother at all. But every time Yuta saw her lips, Yuta became nervous and could hardly eat anything while looking at the beautiful Alyssa. It was hard to believe she was only 18 years old. Then she called to him and offered to feed him with her hands. Yuta felt flustered and said that was too great an honor. She told him not to be shy because, if anything, the honor was all hers. Yuta replied that he could feed himself. Alyssa made a cute face and asked if she wasn't good enough, her sparkling puppy dog eyes making it impossible for Yuta to resist, and he agreed to let her feed him. Yuta took a bite and she asked if he liked it. After he replied that the food was delicious, Alyssa leaned in close and whispered, asking if he liked her lips. She said it was her first time, so she was nervous too and her body felt hot for some reason. Alyssa asked what they should do next, which was exactly what Yuta wanted to know. Then someone came through the crowd apologizing for pushing and said they had finally found Yuta. It was Yuri. After waking up, Yuri had rushed over and apologized to Yuta for missing her chance to see him on stage. Yuta said he was totally fine and was even grateful that she hadn't seen what happened earlier. However, seeing Yuta being friendly with another girl, Alyssa got a little worried and linked her arm with his, saying the dishes at the next table looked delicious so they should go try them. Yuri tried to stop Alyssa, but it was too late, and when Yuta saw Yuri's worried expression, he told Alyssa to go on ahead because he wanted to talk to Yuri for a bit. Alyssa stared at Yuri, then held onto his arm and decided to stay. Yuta felt like he was caught between the two of them without understanding why. Yuri called out to him and said there was just one thing she wanted to say, making Yuta wonder what it could be. Yuri then thanked Yuta for creating Digimas, saying that reading it always gave her strength. Yuta felt happy receiving such sincere praise. She continued, saying his novel had been with her through tough times, and whenever she felt down, it always cheered her up. Yuri smiled and took Yuta's hand, saying she'd always waited for the day she could thank him in person. The genuine, pure expression on her face reminded him how glad he was that he came, and that he'd kept writing Digimas even though he never expected to be thanked by so many people. Tears of joy streamed down his cheeks as he said that he was the one who should be thanking her for reading and loving his work. Yuri blushed and moved in to hug Yuta, which made Alyssa furious. Suddenly, Yuri pulled back and apologized for hugging him out of sheer happiness. Yuta asked if she was all right or needed to rest more, and she replied that he was really kind. Yuta felt flattered and proud, while Alyssa grew irritated and cut in between them, asking Yuri who she thought she was to call Kimamatsu-sama just Yuta. Yuta said that he didn't really mind since he wasn't such an important figure himself. But Yuri agreed that she should be more mindful of her manners. Yuta was shocked and suggested that she really didn't need to call him sensei. But Alyssa just glared at Yuri and remarked that the two of them seemed very close. Not wanting to be left out, Alyssa hugged Yuta tighter and asked Yuri who she thought she was, standing in front of her boyfriend, Yuta. Yuta was shocked by this confident lie, as he didn't remember ever agreeing to date her. Yuri worriedly asked Yuta if it was true that he was dating Alyssa, and Alyssa quickly confirmed it was, while Yuta tried to deny it and signal for Yuri to trust him. Yuri sighed in relief when she realized the truth. Yuta asked why she was so relieved, but she just told him not to worry about it. Meanwhile, Alyssa couldn't help but worry and puffed out her cheeks, demanding that Yuta call her Alyssa. Yuta felt unsure since she was older than him, but Alyssa insisted and was too cute for him to refuse. He figured if he could call Yuri by her first name, then calling Alyssa by hers shouldn't be a problem either. He also told Alyssa to call him something other than sensei, and Alyssa quickly agreed, starting to call him Yuta-sama and hugging him immediately. She shot Yuri a triumphant look, which annoyed Yuri since she hadn't gotten a word in. Yuta told them both to stop, and that's how a love triangle formed around Yuta. The rest of his first anniversary party flew by in a flash, filled with both awe and emotion from the thanks he received from so many people. It left a deep impression on him, and the party made Yuta realize once again that his childhood friend's approval wasn't everything. However, he felt like he was forgetting something, and it was his dad, who had apparently gotten lost again. Meanwhile, Michiru was completely oblivious, until she stumbled upon a shocking post. In the post, a member of the Digimas film crew was meeting with the author Kimamatsu. Although a sticker covered the face to keep their identity secret, Michiru felt the face behind it resembled Yuta. She remembered the time she told Yuta she would never believe he was Kimamatsu, after which she heard him crying outside. It made her feel a little guilty hearing him cry, and it also stung because, up until now, No matter how cruel she was to him, Yuta had always just laughed it off. But if he was crying, she thought maybe he was actually serious this time. But even so, she decided not to forgive Yuta for making fun of Kimamatsu, and still thought he was lying about being a real writer. However, after seeing the post about the real Kimamatsu, she couldn't help but recall the words he'd once said about being Kimamatsu. She swallowed hard and laughed, thinking there was no way he could be Kimamatsu, and decided to go buy some ice cream to calm down. She felt lucky to have bought the last limited edition strawberry ice cream cone. Then she saw a taxi pull up in front of Yuta's house and thought it was strange. Michiru then saw Yuta's dad get out and figured it was just him. But then she heard him call out the names Yuri and Alyssa, inviting them in for tea. Michiru quickly hid behind a pole to listen more closely, wondering if she had misheard Yuta's dad calling Yuri and Alyssa's names. It was just so hard for her to believe they could be here. It was so weird. Then she saw Yuta get out of the car and tell his dad to wait. Michiru noticed he was wearing a suit with a tacky-looking tie. She wondered if he'd gone to some event, while silently pitying anyone who had to see that tie. She had always known about his weird sense of style since they were kids, and couldn't believe he dared to claim he was the Kimamatsu she had been thinking of. But something surprised her when she remembered the picture from the social media post with Kimamatsu in it. Then, she heard a girl's voice, and to her surprise, it was Alyssa Seiba and Kamagane Yuri getting out of the car, looking at Yuta's house. Michiru's jaw dropped at the sight, wondering why those two were here. She figured they had to be lookalikes, because from her perspective, Yuta was just a normal, withdrawn high school boy, and there was no reason for him to know two actual celebrities. Then Yuta told his dad that it was late, and he couldn't just invite two girls into the house of a guy they just met. His dad agreed that he had been a bit too forward. He then asked Yuri and Alyssa if they felt uncomfortable coming into Yuta's house. Both girls replied that they didn't mind and that it would be good practice for Yuta to meet his fans. Yuta's dad clarified to him that he wasn't forcing them and that both Yuri and Alyssa, the two actual celebrities, were asking to come in, and he couldn't refuse. Michiru was so shocked to hear that the two girls were actual celebrities that she fell to the ground, stunned. She remembered Yuta's dad saying he was important to their publishing company, but she still couldn't understand why two people from the world of the Digimaz movie were at Yuta's house. She was amazed at what was happening here. Just then, Yuta's mom came out of the house and told his dad to stop shouting in the street. She welcomed Yuta back, and then his dad said they had some incredibly famous guests. His mom told him to keep it down so he wouldn't wake the neighbors. Then Alyssa stepped forward and addressed her as Yuta's mother, apologizing for the late visit. She formally introduced herself and expressed her desire to marry her son, Yuta. Yuta's mother was stunned by this sudden marriage proposal, while Yuri felt like she was being left behind. Yuta's dad and Michiru were both shocked by Alyssa's unexpectedly direct approach. Michiru couldn't even imagine Alyssa marrying Yuta, something she thought would never happen, not even if the world was ending. Then Yuri spoke up, introducing herself as Yuta's friend, and said that for now, she was just his friend, but that she also hoped to one day be able to call his mom, Mom. Michiru was stunned by one confession after another, and wondered if she was dreaming or had wandered into some kind of fictional world. Yuta's mom replied that she understood and invited both Yuri and Alyssa inside, since she couldn't have them shouting at the doorstep. She decided that if the two of them were competing to be Yuta's wife, she needed to evaluate them both. Yuta tried to say it was all too sudden, but his mother agreed that since it was the weekend, she would invite Yuri and Alyssa to stay the night. Yuri and Alyssa were both overjoyed, while Yuta was stunned, as if his words held no weight. Yuta's father hugged him in excitement, imagining being called father by two famous stars. Yuta's mother called out to him and told him to stop acting weird, then punched him in the stomach, leaving him to his fate. While Yuta's mother invited everyone inside, Michiru returned home like a walking corpse and collapsed on her bed, thinking about everything she'd just witnessed. She couldn't help but worry about how Yuta knew those girls and why they would show so much affection for a gloomy, unsociable, and dull guy like him. Suddenly, the word dull reminded her of his outfit, and she quickly checked the social media posts again. She realized the tie on Kimamatsu was identical to the one she saw Yuta wearing. Putting all these details together, it meant that she had insulted the very Kimamatsu she admired. Michiru decided to stop thinking about it, telling herself it was all just ridiculous speculation that she would forget as soon as she woke up. At that moment, all Michiru could do was deny reality, as she couldn't bear to face the possibility that she had made a huge mistake. She couldn't sleep the entire night, and when Monday came, Michiru was sleep-deprived and blamed it on Yuta. She decided she would investigate everything thoroughly and find solid proof that Kimamatsu and Yuta were not the same person. But then she wondered how she could even talk to him after cutting ties like that. Near the school gate, a group of girls were cheering around a boy named Nakatsugawa, who seemed to be very popular for playing sports. The girls wished him good morning, hoping he would notice them and smile back. But Michiru found it bizarre and couldn't understand why girls cared about such a conceited jerk. She thought that even Yuta was 100 times better than that guy and continued on her way. Some girls joked that Michiru would make a good match for Nakatsugawa, and the boys seemed to take notice of her as well. As Michiru was changing her shoes, someone wished her good morning. Thinking it was Nakatsu, she turned around to be polite. But it turned out to be Yuta. Seeing him made her feel a little relieved. Now, Digimus was a special story for her, ever since her mother passed away and her father moved abroad for work. Digimus was always there to help her overcome her pain. The problems and conflicts depicted in it made her feel as if the story was written just for her, which was actually true at the time, though she didn't know it. Digimus was also the first work that made her feel that way, although there might have been another story, but she had long since forgotten it. Regardless, Digimus was always her anchor, and its author, Kimamatsu, had become her savior. That's why she wouldn't let anyone insult him, let alone pretend to be him like Yuta did. But now, Yuta was greeting her as if nothing had happened. She felt a bit anxious remembering all that, then suddenly snapped, "What did you just say to me?" after she had told him not to talk to her. Yuta apologized and said it was just a habit. Then she said that he could talk to her if he really wanted to. Yuta thought that everything was fine then, while Michiru was happy that he was the first to approach her. But she still wanted someone to explain how Yuta could be so nonchalant, as if he hadn't cried his eyes out after being rejected. Yuta asked if she had done the homework, and Michiru was shocked because she had completely forgotten about it, being too preoccupied with thinking about Yuta and Kimamatsu. Her head started to feel dizzy, and Yuta asked if she was okay, saying she looked a little pale and asking if she needed to go to the nurse's office. But she yelled that she was fine and didn't need any help, silently blaming him. Yuta tried to help, but she walked away, thinking that the lack of sleep was really getting to her and that she needed to calm down. She also wanted to find proof that Yuta wasn't Kimamatsu to clear the worries from her mind. She entered the classroom and asked another girl for help with the homework. Yuta sat down in his usual seat, and Michiru occasionally glanced over at him. She knew for a fact that Alyssa and Yuri had been to Yuta's house, but she needed to find out what led to that. She thought about asking him about it casually, so she called out to him with a slightly nervous voice and asked if he went anywhere over the weekend. Yuta replied that it was related to his father's work. And she realized that if the post she saw was correct, a Digimas party had taken place over the weekend. Since Yuri and Alyssa were involved with Digimas, it was very likely they were there. Still, she wondered why they would want to go with a quiet person like him. She quickly dismissed the thought, thinking that perhaps Yuta's father was just accidentally involved with Digimas due to his job and had taken Yuta along to the party. She asked if he made any friends there, and Yuta was silent for a moment before saying, "Yeah," with a radiant smile. Michiru wondered why he was smiling like that, and if he was really that happy to have met Yuri and Alyssa. She sighed and wondered why she was feeling so irritated just because of a few new friends he made. Yuta asked Michiru if something was bothering her. And she snapped that yes, there was, though even she didn't know why. Yuta got a notification on his phone because he had forgotten to put it on silent. Michiru felt anxious because she knew his family wouldn't text during class. And so she asked who had just texted him. Yuta replied that it was just one of the new friends he had mentioned. Michiru flew into a rage, thinking it must be one of those two girls. And seeing Yuta smile while texting them back really pissed her off. She wished he would stop smiling at some silly text message and stood up in a fit of anger. Michiru snatched his phone and yelled at him to stop. But then she realized her impulsive act had put her in an awkward situation. Yuta asked if something was wrong, and she was at a loss for how to answer, as if she couldn't stand seeing him talking to other girls. She quickly made up an excuse and told him that class was about to start, so he shouldn't be on his phone. Yuta agreed that she had a point and thanked Michiru. Just then, the teacher entered the classroom and told everyone to take their seats. Michiru wondered what she was doing, as she now felt irritated seeing him happy, and also couldn't understand why she couldn't stand to see him smile for someone else. Later, while she was washing her hands, her friends called out to her and asked if she would join their plan to start their own channel. Since she was pretty, she would surely attract a lot of views. This reminded Michiru of a hurtful comment that she was a reflection of her mother, and Michiru whispered that she didn't even like her own face. Then she corrected herself, saying she wouldn't join because she was busy with other things. The girls were bummed by her answer, and Michiru started to walk away while they still watched her. Because according to them, Michiru was acting really weird today. They knew she wasn't a bad person, at least. And one reason they were sure of that was because she still hung out with her quiet childhood friend. One of the girls said not to mention it in front of Michiru again. Because when they badmouthed Yuta once, Michiru came over and warned them that only she, his childhood friend, was allowed to talk bad about Yuta, and that they should stop. Since then, the girl would secretly tease Michiru behind her back about this. In class, the teacher asked the students to name a word that functions as an adjective. And as she was speaking, Michiru glanced over at Yuta. Yuta felt a little self-conscious about it, and wondered if he was just imagining things, since she kept looking at him. Then Yuta received a message from Alyssa saying that she was looking forward to their meeting tonight. Yuta smiled and replied with a funny sticker, saying he was looking forward to it too, since it would be his first time meeting a friend for tea. Michiru muttered about why he was flirting in class and how he could think so highly of himself. Just then, the teacher slammed a book on her head and warned her not to talk during class. Yuta asked if she was okay, but she got angry and shot him a look that said it was all his fault. Then he got a message from Alyssa, saying she would pick him up from school. When school was over, Yuta left the classroom and noted Michiru's strange behavior today. He was called back by Michiru and was surprised to see her there, since she would usually leave right after the lessons ended. She asked if he was heading home, and he replied that he actually had plans, but would stop by his house to drop off his things first. Michiru was a bit nervous, but she convinced herself this was for the sake of her investigation, so she suggested they could walk home together. At this point, Yuta was sure something was off. But even though he didn't really understand, he thought it was fine and that they could talk like this after everything that had happened. Besides, it was nice to walk home together after such a long time. Even though Michiru's rejection had hurt him, to him, Michiru was still his important childhood friend, and that had never changed. However, he told her she was walking a little too close to him as they walked, and she replied that he didn't need to worry about her. Yuta had absolutely no idea what was going on with Michiru today. Here he was, walking home with his childhood friend, just like the good old days. However, the faint floral scent, the soft feeling on his arm, and her intense gaze were nothing like the usual Michiru. He asked why she was staring at him, and she asked back if he had a problem with it. He told her she should watch where she was going, but she didn't care what he said, even when Yuta tried to warn her about the stairs up ahead. Michiru was so lost in thought that she slipped on the step. And just as she was about to fall, Yuta quickly reached out to catch her, causing both of them to tumble down the stairs, with Michiru landing on top of Yuta. She asked if he was okay, and Yuta replied that he was fine, which made her feel relieved. Yuta realized Michiru was actually very kind, but his eyes unintentionally saw something they shouldn't have, making him quickly ask if she could get up because he could see everything. This made Michiru blush, and she quickly got up, saying he shouldn't have looked in the first place. Yuta tried to explain that he didn't mean to, and even mentioned that it was fine since they used to bathe together as kids. And it wasn't strange for him to see her in her usual striped underwear. Michiru told him to shut up and started walking off in a huff. Yuta kept apologizing to her. Then he received a message from Alyssa saying she was waiting at the gate. He wondered where she was. Then a man in sunglasses looked at him with a sharp gaze. Michiru told Yuta to look at the scary man at the gate and said they should get out of there quickly, as she thought he might be a yakuza. But as they walked past the person, he immediately started following Yuta and Michiru. He called out to Yuta, and Michiru hid behind him, while Yuta had to summon all his courage to ask the man what he wanted from them. The man bowed his head and said he didn't mean to frighten them. It turned out to be the complete opposite of what they had imagined, as this person was actually Alyssa's personal assistant and had come to pick Yuta up. Yuta didn't believe that he really worked for Alyssa, but the assistant led them to her, and Yuta saw Alyssa sitting in a limousine. Alyssa greeted Yuta and said that she had come to pick him up today. Michiru was stunned to see Alyssa so up close, and Yuta mentioned that he didn't expect Alyssa to come in a limousine, which made Alyssa happy that her surprise had worked. The assistant then asked Yuta to get into the car, but he paused and turned to look at Michiru. The assistant asked if Michiru was Yuta's girlfriend and said that he would be happy to take her home. This situation completely took Michiru by surprise. Yuta thought she didn't like the implication, while Michiru just ran off. Yuta thought she was probably upset, and the assistant didn't understand why. Yuta felt bad and planned to apologize to her tomorrow, since it had been so long since they last walked home together. But he guessed she didn't like people thinking they were a couple. Alyssa linked her arm with Yuta's and said they should get going because she wanted to take him to her house. Yuta hadn't expected the place she wanted to spend time with him would be her home, and they left in the limousine. Meanwhile, Michiru was watching from behind a poster, still unable to believe that Yuta and Alyssa had gotten that close. Two boys from her school came up and asked Michiru what she was doing here, to which she replied nothing in particular. They said they were running laps around the school to prepare for the inter-high tournament, and started bragging about their training, while also inviting her and the other girls to come see their match. Michiru replied that she would check her schedule later and said she had to go now. She walked away feeling annoyed by those boys, while one of them asked Nakatsu if he was really interested in Michiru. Nakatsu replied that he likes strong girls and that he has his sights set on her. Meanwhile, Yuta had arrived at Alyssa's home, a luxurious building, and her apartment was just as magnificent. He thought that from this height, the city looked like a miniature model. Alyssa made them some coffee and told Yuta to make himself at home, while he still couldn't believe that an introverted guy like him was drinking coffee with a beautiful girl like her. And at her house, no less. He tasted the coffee and found it wasn't bitter, which proved she had used expensive coffee beans. Alyssa suddenly moved closer, excited to see Yuta drinking the iced coffee she had made. Yuta noticed how close she was and remarked that she seemed quite wealthy. Alyssa replied that she wasn't as rich as him, but that she was indeed well off, and asked how he managed his finances. Yuta said his mother was very good at it, so he let her handle everything. Alyssa recalled that it was true his mother was very capable of managing things, and that his father seemed quite special. She said she was a little jealous. Yuta asked where her parents were, and she replied that she lived here alone, with her assistant only visiting a few times a week. Yuta felt that her family situation was a bit complicated. Then, Alyssa said she had a bold request, and asked if Yuta could give her an autograph. Yuta didn't expect her bold request to be something like that, especially after her performance on stage. He agreed to give her an autograph, which made her very happy. She brought out a Digimos book and asked him to sign it. Yuta quickly signed the book, and she was surprised at how fast he did it, showing he was used to it. Yuta replied that yes, he was used to it because the publishing company always asked him to sign thousands of copies with every new release. Alyssa said he was amazing and that she would treasure the signed book forever. Yuta felt happy knowing someone could be so happy just from his autograph. So he thanked her and asked if he could have her autograph in return. Alyssa agreed, and Yuta said that since he didn't have anything special with him, he asked if a piece of paper would be okay. Alyssa said it was no problem, but when she sat down to sign her name, she messed it up and had to ask for another piece of paper. She apologized and admitted she had never done this before, because she actually always refused to give autographs. Yuta asked if there was a special reason for that. Alyssa replied that it might sound surprising, but she wasn't good at communicating with people. Yuta couldn't believe it, especially after seeing her confidence on stage. He then asked how she was able to perform so well live. Alyssa said it wasn't a problem when she was singing, because she would focus on the song and forget about everything else. Yuta began to realize that she had invited him to her home because she was too anxious in public places. He asked if she had any trouble at the anniversary party. She replied that it was a very special event, so she couldn't miss it. And besides, if she hadn't gone, she would have never met Kimamatsu or Yuta. Yuta realized she was right and understood that her special job must be very important to her. She also had a first edition copy of the book with a sticker on it, its edges worn, showing it had been read many times. He commented that she must really love Digimos, and she agreed, saying she loved it more than anything. Yuta thanked her and said that he loved her songs too. Alyssa blushed so hard at his compliment that she accidentally spilled her iced coffee on her dress. Yuta asked if she was okay, and she assured him she was fine, but now she felt incredibly embarrassed. She said it would be better if she changed her clothes and before leaving, asked if he wanted to go to the bathroom with her, leaving Yuta stunned and blushing. Yuta couldn't believe she would ask something like that so suddenly, wondering what she had just said. Alyssa then told him she was just kidding. Yuta told her not to scare him like that again. She said it would take a while to change, so he could feel free to explore the apartment. But even so, Yuta felt it was wrong to invade a woman's privacy. But then he thought he might never get another chance to visit a famous singer's home, so he decided to look around, thinking it could be good reference material for his story. While exploring, he saw an open door and went in to take a look. Yuta realized this was definitely a famous singer's room, with many musical instruments and singing equipment, and the room was completely soundproof. There were also music sheets scattered on the floor. Yuta was impressed, thinking she must use so many sheets of paper to write a song. Suddenly, Alyssa ran in wearing only a towel and told Yuta he could look anywhere except this room. Yuta was startled by her sudden appearance and asked where her clothes were. Alyssa told him not to look because it was too embarrassing. Yuta quickly closed his eyes, saying he wasn't trying to look at her body and blamed her for showing up without being properly dressed. Alyssa didn't react, and her towel slipped off and fell to the ground. She stood there wearing nothing, and Yuta got a clear view of her entire body, causing him to have a nosebleed. Alyssa blushed and mumbled that the situation was so embarrassing. Yuta hastily left the room, apologizing to her, and his heart gradually calmed down after he got out. He sighed, thinking the situation had nearly given him a heart attack, and he couldn't believe he had just seen such a beautiful girl with nothing on, his mind unable to stop thinking about her beauty. Then Yuta realized that when she told him not to look, she actually meant not to look at the music sheets. Alyssa apologized to him for the terrible mistake and said she didn't mean to show him her imperfect body. Yuta told her she didn't need to say that because it was actually very beautiful. But he immediately felt bad for saying that. Alyssa said it was embarrassing to hear, and Yuta apologized again. Yuta also apologized for entering her studio. Alyssa admitted it was her fault, since she was the one who told him to explore freely. And if she didn't want him to see something, she should have put it away, but forgot. Yuta asked if she meant the music sheets, and she nodded, explaining that she was working on the opening song for the second season of Digimas. Yuta was surprised to hear that, because the second season had just been announced a few days ago and didn't even have a broadcast date yet. He remarked that she started working on it very early. Alyssa replied that composing a song usually takes a lot of time, so Yuta understood that she must go through a lot of revisions each time. He was very impressed that she put so much effort into each song. Alyssa said that the songs are made to enhance the main work, so she always tries to take her time to create something she's satisfied with. That's why she didn't want to show him, of all people, her unfinished music sheets. Yuta didn't expect that was what she was worried about. Then Alyssa heard him say that he understood how she felt and was happy to see someone else's creative process. It made him feel closer to her, and he told her she didn't need to be embarrassed, at least not with him. Alyssa felt comfortable with him, and then asked if he wanted to hear the song. Yuta happily agreed, and Alyssa led him into the studio and started playing the piano. She played the melody of the new song, and Yuta could feel how wonderful it was, as if he could sense the world of Digimas in every note. When Alyssa finished her performance, Yuta praised the song, saying it was really impressive, and even said it was ready because he liked it so much. Alyssa thanked him for the compliment, and she was very happy to receive praise directly from Yuta. However, Alyssa mentioned she was having a problem because she couldn't think of good lyrics yet. Yuta listened as she described that the song would be nothing without Digimas, so she needed to come up with something worthy of accompanying Yuta's great work. She believed the lyrics had to be something that both the readers and the author would cherish. Yuta was captivated by her way of thinking. She then apologized if she sounded too bold for talking about her problems. Yuta said that wasn't it at all, and that he understood she was incredibly passionate and had put in so much effort for him and Digimas. He wondered if there was any way he could help her. Then he asked if there was any way he could help, since he was the author and they could brainstorm ideas together. Alyssa asked if he really meant that, and Yuta confirmed he did, as long as she was comfortable with it. This was a proud moment for Alyssa, moving her to tears. Yuta was startled to see her crying and asked what was wrong. She replied that in her wildest dreams, she never imagined she would get to work on a song with her favorite author. Yuta said that since they both worked for the same franchise, they were like comrades on the battlefield. Hearing this, Alyssa was delighted, and he continued, saying that they surely shared the same goals and vision. So, as comrades, it was only natural to help each other out when needed, without worrying about status. Alyssa was moved by his sincere and kind words and hugged Yuta tightly, making it a little hard for him to breathe, but he bore with it because of her sweet scent. Alyssa thanked him profusely, and with tears of gratitude, she said she looked forward to them both giving it their all. Yuta agreed, and they worked on the lyrics together for as long as they could. Meanwhile, that same night, Michiru was happy reading the latest chapter of Digimas, but at the same time, she realized she wasn't truly happy, even knowing Kimamatsu would be posting more often. She guessed that he must have met another hardworking creator and felt inspired to work harder. Michiru wondered if the hardworking friend Kimamatsu mentioned was Alyssa, since she'd seen Yuta with her before. And now, feeling anxious, Michiru realized that Kimamatsu's comment lined up too perfectly with recent events, suggesting Yuta could actually be Kimamatsu. But she still refused to believe it and scolded herself, kicking her bed in frustration. Suddenly, she heard the doorbell ring and wondered who could be visiting at this hour. She didn't think she had ordered anything, and when she looked through the peephole, it was Yuta. She felt as if he could read her mind. Anyway, she opened the door and asked why he was here so late. Yuta apologized and said he just came by to give her something. He then handed her a bag and said that Alyssa's assistant, Nicole, had asked him to pass it along to her. She asked who that was, and Yuta explained it was the man they had met at the school gate that day. She confirmed if he meant that robot-like guy, and Yuta said he was sorry for scaring her and that this was his apology. Michiru denied that she was scared at all, and was surprised to see the bag contained an expensive type of tea called gyokuro. Now she felt obligated to give him something in return. Yuta said it was an apology, so Nicole had insisted she take it. Michiru figured if that was the case, then it was no big deal. When Yuta asked if she was angry, Michiru denied it, but it was obvious she was uncomfortable. She realized that having a normal conversation with Yuta was irritating her, because it just felt wrong. However, she also saw this as an opportunity to find definitive proof that Yuta was not Kimamatsu. Michiru invited Yuta in to have the tea together. Yuta agreed, if she didn't mind, and Michiru felt this was the perfect opportunity now that Yuta was in her house. After Michiru prepared the tea, Yuta apologized for earlier, when she had invited him to walk home with her, but then left without him. Michiru said it was fine and that she didn't want to that badly anyway. Yuta thought everything was fine, and Michiru's inner detective didn't notice anything unusual either. So she asked him how his time with Alyssa went. Yuta answered frankly that it was nice and that they had tea together. He said it was a really fulfilling time and that he never thought hanging out with a friend could be so enjoyable. Michiru congratulated him and asked if he planned on seeing her again. But Yuta told her they hadn't made any future plans, and that this Saturday, he was going to Kawasaki with another friend. Michiru angrily slammed her cup on the table, knowing she had no right to be upset since she was the one who asked. She took his words as bragging and felt like he was trying to make her anxious. Yuta asked if he'd said something wrong, but Michiru denied it, saying there was no problem. Then he asked if she was angry. Michiru admitted that yes, she was annoyed, while at the same time not understanding why the thought of Yuta hanging out with other girls bothered her so much. She shook her head, denying it could be jealousy, and it definitely wasn't love. Yuta remarked that she seemed strange today, to which she angrily replied that she's always been this way, ever since she was born. Michiru asked him again when he was meeting that friend. He replied at 10 a.m., but when he asked why she wanted to know, she snapped that it was because she didn't want to see his face on the weekend. Yuta figured as much, so he left, and they wished each other good night. However, Michiru couldn't stand the sight of Yuta's happy face without getting annoyed, and she hadn't been able to ask everything she wanted to, so she figured she would have to observe him more closely tomorrow, Saturday. When Yuta's train arrived in Kawasaki, he felt a bit nervous since he was about to meet a girl. He recalled that after exchanging contact info with Yuri, they had texted back and forth a lot. And now she had invited him out. He felt a bit awkward since it had been a while since they'd spoken in person. Just then, Yuri showed up and called out to Yuta, apologizing for keeping him waiting. Yuta noticed she was in a disguise, but she still looked beautiful. She wished him good morning, and he returned the greeting, saying he'd only just arrived. She was relieved to hear that. Before they set off, Yuri apologized for what had happened at the party, saying she'd been a bit too aggressive with Alyssa and had gone too far, which might have made him uncomfortable. After she cooled down, she realized she'd been a bother to them both. Yuta said he really didn't mind. And if anything, the two of them had made the party much more interesting. And Alyssa seemed to have enjoyed herself too. Yuri asked again if he was sure, and Yuta nodded, which made her very happy. She realized Yuta was right that they should just have fun, and she took his hand as they walked off. Yuta wondered if it was normal to hold hands like this. She asked him if something was wrong, and Yuta replied that he just wasn't used to it, but she seemed so confident, as if she had done this many times before. Yuri smiled and reassured him that he was the first boy she had ever been on a date with. That made Yuta happy, and she explained that she was just used to being around men because of her job. She also mentioned her brother, which is how Yuta learned she had one. After that, they headed to a movie theater. It was packed since it was a Saturday, and it was full of couples and families. Yuta wondered if he'd made a mistake by following a dating guide that suggested going to the movies. Suddenly, Yuri asked if they looked like they were just a boy and a girl out together, or more specifically, if they looked like a couple. Yuta's heart nearly burst from her cute, close whisper. Then Yuri asked what movie they should see. Yuta asked if she saw any movie she liked, guessing she would probably choose a romance film. But to his surprise, Yuri pointed at the Digimas movie, and Yuta asked if she was sure. model. She asked him again if he wanted to see it, and Yuta agreed that if she wanted to, he was fine with it. Hearing that, Yuri quickly went to buy tickets, and Yuta realized she was really energetic. Meanwhile, someone was watching Yuta from behind, but when he turned around, he saw no one, though he could still feel someone's eyes on him. Shortly after, Yuri came back with popcorn and soda for the movie. Yuta saw she was carrying a lot and asked if she could eat it all. Yuri replied that it was a piece of cake. Yuta offered to split the cost with her, but Yuri reassured him not to worry since they were watching the movie she wanted to see. She told him to hurry into the theater. Yuta noticed she didn't show any disdain for his reserved personality as she took his hand and led him away. He thought it might just be politeness, but her kindness and energy made him genuinely happy. As they entered the theater, Michiru was still watching them. After the movie ended, people came out of the theater praising Kimamatsu as a god for creating such a masterpiece. Yuri loved the film and commented that she'd never get tired of watching it, no matter how many times she did. She apologized for crying during the movie, just like everyone else. Yuta asked if it was normal for the audience to clap after the movie ended, and she replied that it was something only Digimus fans do. It showed their appreciation for Yuta's work, which made him feel happy. He also said that the appreciation wasn't just for him, but for the entire staff. Yuri told him that even so, he was the one who received the most praise. Yuta noticed that Yuri was not only a talented voice actress, but also had incredibly captivating expressions. On the other hand, Yuta thought he looked pathetic in comparison, especially when he heard other guys calling him the quiet one while complimenting Yuri on how cute she was. He felt a little sorry for her. She asked him what was wrong, and he replied that he wasn't worthy of being out with her. Yuri told him he shouldn't put himself down like that. Yuta felt a bit bad for her, since she was so outgoing while he wasn't. Yuri placed her finger on his lips, telling him to stop thinking negatively, because if he kept thinking he wasn't good enough, those thoughts would eventually become reality. Yuta was taken aback by her action. Then Yuri said that he should think of himself as the great Kimamatsu, who earned 50 billion yen, and smiled to give him more confidence. Yuta realized she was right. Suddenly, Michiru, who was sitting behind them in disguise, spilled her drink when she heard the name Kimamatsu. Then Yuta went over to ask if she was okay, and he recognized Michiru immediately despite her disguise. The situation made Yuta wonder if their meeting her was just a coincidence. While Michiru knew that her cover had been blown, Yuta wondered why she was here. And Yuri couldn't help but be surprised as well. The attendant asked Michiru if she was okay, but she just ran off, saying she was perfectly fine. Yuta ran after her, saying that it was definitely Michiru, but she tried to hide it by pretending she couldn't speak Japanese. Yuta said that she had forgotten her phone, so Michiru had no choice but to give up and remove her disguise. Yuta said he didn't expect to see her here too. Michiru said she just had something to do here. Then Yuri came over and asked what was going on. Yuta apologized for suddenly running off, after which Yuri asked if he knew this girl. Yuta introduced Michiru as his childhood friend who also happened to be here. Yuri smiled and said it was nice to meet Yuta's childhood friend, while Michiru just muttered that she felt the same. Yuta asked why she ran off like that, and Michiru asked back why he cared. Then said she just needed to use the restroom, but the feeling went away after she saw him. Yuri then asked Michiru if she wouldn't mind joining them for lunch. Michiru was surprised by the sudden invitation, then stared at Yuta, who said it was fine with him. Michiru agreed to join, saying she had no other choice. Yuri mentioned that there were a lot of things she wanted to talk to Michiru about. Michiru replied in the same way, which flustered Yuri a bit. While Michiru thought that even though her disguise was blown, this was a better chance, and to gather all the information she could from Komagane Yuri, including what she meant when she mentioned Kimamatsu. Afterward, they went to a different cafe because Michiru wanted to avoid any awkwardness. Yuta brought their orders, consisting of burgers and drinks, to the table. Yuri was worried seeing him carry everything, and he told her not to worry. reminding her that she had bought the tickets and everything earlier. Michiru seemed a bit annoyed without understanding her own feelings. Yuta called out to Michiru and gave her a sandwich and an unsweetened cafe latte. Michiru realized that Yuta had picked her favorite things and thanked him. Yuta replied that it was great since he'd known her for a long time. Michiru kicked him lightly under the table, telling him not to let that get to his head. Yuta apologized while Yuri watched them and said that they looked so close, like a couple, which made her feel envious. Michiru loudly denied it and asked who would call them a couple, and Yuta also said that they weren't like that. Michiru got angry again and kicked Yuta once more. He asked what he did wrong this time, and she just told him to shut up because it pissed her off that he denied it. She smirked and glanced at Yuri, but then immediately felt bad for letting this get to her. Yuta asked her what was wrong. Then Yuri asked how long the two of them had known each other as childhood friends. Yuta replied that they'd known each other since they were little, as they were both born in the same hospital. And since they lived close by, they often played together. Michiru commented that there was no getting away from him. Yuri found that cute, like a dream. Yuri then leaned closer to Michiru and asked that since they had been together for so long, there must have been a time when Michiru liked Yuta. Yuri's expression was adorable and curious, making Michiru feel overwhelmed talking about romantic matters. Michiru replied, asking why she would ever care about someone as bland and boring as him. Yuri said that she wasn't so sure about that, because to her, Yuta seemed to be a very genuine and kind person, just like the person she likes. Michiru was annoyed, thinking how Yuri could say those things right in front of Yuta, while Yuta felt complimented and thanked her. Michiru disliked Yuta's goofy smile and thought he must be over the moon to be noticed by a beautiful girl. Yuri was saying nice things about Yuta, and Michiru found it incredibly irritating to see him getting swept up by those silly words. And what's more, she wondered why she was getting so worked up. She called Yuta an idiot and said that a famous voice actress like Yuri only cared about her reputation. So she bet Yuri says things like that to every guy she meets just to make an impression. Yuta told Michiru she shouldn't say things like that, and then Yuri also firmly stated that she wasn't like that at all. Michiru and Yuta were surprised to hear Yuri raise her voice, but she stood her ground and repeated that she wasn't that kind of person, and that if she says she likes someone, she means it. Yuta was moved by Yuri's words, while Michiru got even more furious, seeing that both Yuri and Yuta were just as foolish. She wondered what Yuri saw in someone like Yuta. Michiru thought that if Yuta really was Kimamatsu, it might make sense, but she still refused to believe it, so she felt she had to find out the truth for herself. Michiru then asked Yuta to move to another seat because she and Yuri needed to talk privately. Yuta was surprised by the sudden request, and Yuri also told him to give them a moment. Yuta agreed and moved to another table, after which Michiru asked Yuri if she was really serious about liking Yuta. Yuri replied that she was and asked if that was a problem for Michiru, given her feelings for him. Michiru yelled that she was just trying to make sure, as Yuta's childhood friend, because with looks like Yuri's, she could date much better guys. She wanted to know why Yuri would choose someone as plain and quiet as Yuta. Yuri refuted that Yuta wasn't like that at all, and that she had the utmost respect for him, as he was incredibly kind and always put others first. Yuri told Michiru that perhaps she was taking Yuta for granted because they'd been together for so long, and she couldn't help but ask how Michiru didn't see how amazing Yuta was. Michiru asked in frustration just what was so amazing about him, and Yuri replied that his stories had touched the hearts of so many people and had even been adapted into an anime and a movie. So many people had cried in the theaters. This was the moment Michiru would hear the very thing she had refused to believe until now. She didn't want Yuri to say any more, but Yuri made it clear that Yuta, as the author of Digimus, was the most amazing writer. This shattered Michiru's heart, as she could no longer deny it. Every sign she'd found, every word Yuta had said, it was all true, and she couldn't even look up after hearing it. Michiru stood up and left the place, while Yuri had no idea what had happened to her or where she was going. Michiru walked away without stopping. Yuta came back and asked Yuri where Michiru had gone. Yuri replied that she wasn't sure. Michiru had just gotten up and left. Yuta guessed that maybe she had something to do, so that might be why she left. However, Yuri said she felt like Michiru had gotten upset and that she might have said something she shouldn't have. Yuta reassured her that it was fine and that even if Yuri had said something, Michiru wasn't the type to hold a grudge. Yuri asked him if he was sure, and Yuta nodded, saying he'd talk to Michiru later and smooth things over. Yuri thought that would probably be fine, and then Yuta asked her what they should do next. Yuri said she hadn't planned anything further and suggested they could go look at some things. Yuta agreed to her suggestion, and they continued their date. Meanwhile, Michiru was sitting alone in silence, and a few guys had tried to talk to her, but they left, thinking she was ignoring them. In reality, Michiru was in shock because all her doubts had vanished. Yuta really was Kimamatsu. While Yuta was having fun looking at clothes with Yuri and getting suggestions from her, Michiru felt devastated, realizing she had rejected a confession from the person she adored, Kimamatsu-sama. After Michiru left, Yuta and Yuri continued their date. When they arrived at a bookstore, there were many Digimus fans walking around inside. Yuri wanted to buy the latest issue of the Digimus manga that was released today. After a little while, Yuta realized she was taking quite some time, so he went to look for her and found Yuri standing with a child who seemed to be lost. Looking at the situation, Yuta understood why she was taking so long. Yuri was reassuring the little boy that they would find his mom, so he didn't need to cry. Yuri had said it in the voice of Ryo, the main character of Digimon, and Yuta found it incredibly cute. Yuta was very impressed when Yuri used Ryo's voice to comfort the boy. Yuri turned around and apologized to Yuta for being late, explaining that the boy was lost. She asked if he could wait there while she found the boy's mother. Yuta offered to help her search, and she happily agreed, telling the boy they had a new friend on their team. The boy was thrilled to hear Ryo's voice, and the three of them set off on an adventure to find his mom. Yuta felt happy watching Yuri play the part of Ryo to cheer the boy up, which showed how kind-hearted she was. When they found the boy's mother, she thanked them both for their help. The boy told his mom that this girl had become Ryo, and Yuri, in Ryo's voice, told him not to cry anymore. He promised her he wouldn't, and Yuri was happy that the boy was back with his mother. Yuta realized that being so friendly and kind to everyone was a talent in itself. The boy's mother asked Yuri if she was Ryo's voice actress, and when she confirmed it, it caught the attention of those around them. And it didn't take long for them to recognize the celebrity. A crowd began to gather, and Yuta was startled by the sudden attention on them. Yuri told him there was only one way out of this, and the two started to run, with Yuri grabbing Yuta's hand. People saw her running away, and Yuri just waved to them. While Yuta got to see many different sides of Yuri and realized she was just a normal girl in the best way. When he was with her, he felt her energy rubbing off on him. He was so happy to be spending time with her. After they got away, Yuri said that she'd definitely dragged him around a lot today. Yuta replied that it was nothing, and that he'd had a lot of fun. Hearing that made Yuri happy too, and she said she'd also enjoy their time together, then asked Yuta if he'd like to go on another date sometime. Hearing that Yuri wanted to keep seeing him made Yuta incredibly happy, and he agreed to hang out with her again some other time. As for Michiru, she was still in shock and completely unresponsive. Her phone buzzed with a notification, and she realized how late it had gotten. But what was more surprising was seeing an update from Kimamatsu saying he had a fun day shopping with a friend in Kawasaki today. Michiru realized there was no room left for doubt, and exclaimed, "Why, of all people, did Kimamatsu have to be Yuta?" She wondered why she hadn't believed him back then, instead causing so much trouble for the Kimamatsu she adored. She berated herself for even calling Kimamatsu her beloved, when she knew it was just Yuta all along. Yuri's words now stung, and she realized she knew nothing about Kimamatsu. She wondered how she could ever face him from now on, and was so troubled that she thought about it for 2 whole days before finding an answer. She concluded that, in the end, Yuta was still just Yuta, And the following Monday morning, she left for school, thinking it would be weird if she treated him differently just because she knew the truth. Just then, she saw Yuta leaving his house, looking a bit tired and sleepy. She wished him good morning and asked if he wanted to walk to school together. Yuta said that was unusual for her, but Michiru just asked again if he wanted to or not. Yuta agreed, and the two started walking together, with her telling him to go on ahead. As Yuta yawned on the way, Michiru felt so nervous she couldn't even look at him directly. She tried to stay calm, reminding herself that he wasn't her type. He was just a loner, the complete opposite of her ideal man. But for some reason, Yuta looked much more radiant today. She had woken up this morning to read the new chapter, so Yuta had probably stayed up all night writing it. She started to feel that even the dark circles under his eyes looked cool and were a testament to his hard work. But then she got annoyed, wondering how she could possibly think he was cool, as if she had lost her mind. Yuta asked her if something was wrong and moved closer to check on her, since her face was bright red. Michiru was startled when he suddenly got close, and she fell over in surprise. She told him he shouldn't get so close to her face, and Yuta apologized, saying he didn't mean to scare her. He was just worried she might have a fever since her face was so red. He touched her forehead to check her temperature, but that only made her blush even more from embarrassment. She quickly ran off, insisting that she was perfectly fine. Yuta hoped Michiru was really okay, and thought that maybe he shouldn't have stayed up so late. Meanwhile, Michiru stopped after running quite a distance and scolded herself, wondering what on earth was wrong with her. At school, the students were buzzing about the newest chapter of Digimaz, surprised it came out so quickly after the last one. The moment Yuta arrived in class, he immediately fell asleep. Michiru puffed out her cheeks, thinking about how he could possibly worry about her when he himself was so exhausted. She realized he really was too concerned about others. Right now, nobody in their class knew that Yuta was Kimamatsu. Michiru also noticed that Yuta never reacted when people talked about Digimaz. And if he'd been more obvious about it, she probably would have realized sooner. Then, someone asked her what she was staring at. And it turned out to be some of her friends from class. Iri said that surely Michiru couldn't be excited sitting next to that guy, which made her friends think Michiru might have a thing for Yuta. Michiru tried to deny it, but her friends then jumped to the conclusion that she was interested in Nikatsu. Michiru sighed in relief that her friends hadn't figured out what was really happening. Then, the girls thought they had misunderstood, until one of them declared she'd figured it out and said that Michiru was really looking at Yuta. Michiru flinched and quickly denied it, but the girls could tell from her body language. And they also recalled how Michiru had snapped at them when they teased Yuta before. Michiru didn't realize she had shouted out loud, asking why she would ever fall for a guy like him. But then she looked back at Yuta and sighed in relief when she saw he was asleep and hadn't heard anything. However, that just made her feel worse. One of the girls said that Michiru would never fall for someone like Yuta, since she only hung out with him out of pity because he didn't have any friends. Right after that, another girl cut in, and Michiru got angry, stood up, and stormed off to the restroom. Her friends realized that comment had really gotten to her, while Michiru was more worried about what was happening to herself. She told herself that Yuta was just Yuta, but she kept finding herself unconsciously looking at him. And whenever he was near, her heart would beat faster. She reacted to him more intensely than normal, and couldn't help treating him differently than everyone else. On top of that, Yuta was Kimamatsu, the person who had always supported her through his story. He was literally always by her side and always looked out for her. Just thinking about it made her heart flutter. She wondered if she had always been such a shallow person, falling for Yuta only because he was Kimamatsu. Michiru also realized what Yuri had meant when she said that she had taken Yuta for granted just because they had been together for so long. Then she received a message from Yuta, asking if she was okay since he didn't see her in class, and that if she wasn't feeling well, she should go see the nurse. At that moment, Michiru could no longer deny that she had truly fallen in love with Yuta, and she didn't want anyone else to take him away from her. Michiru couldn't help but think back on all their moments together, and she couldn't recall a single time when Yuta wasn't kind to her. No matter how terribly she treated him, he would just laugh it off and forgive her. When things were difficult and she felt alone, Michiru remembered that he was always by her side. When she was unwell, he always prioritized her health. This had been happening ever since they were children, and Michiru realized that Yuta's gentle smile had always been reserved just for her. But now, there were other people in his life, which left her wondering what she was supposed to do. She regretted rejecting him and hurting him, and now it felt like it was too late to do anything about it. But if she did nothing, Yuta would be taken by those other two. She wondered if it was truly too late. And a flicker of hope ignited that she could still fix things. After all, while Yuri and Alyssa had only known him for a few days, she'd been by his side for over a decade. She decided to Google her situation to get some ideas, and after reading a few posts, she figured her chances weren't half bad. Michiru was also confident that Yuta would never turn her down, being the kind childhood friend he was. So she decided to text Yuta. After thinking for a moment, she messaged him that she had changed her mind and wouldn't mind going out with him after all. Michiru felt extremely nervous and her face was burning up. Since this was the first time she had ever confessed her feelings to anyone, she hadn't expected to be this flustered. But she finally mustered all her courage and sent the text. Michiru felt a sense of relief and couldn't believe she was about to start dating Yuta. She was certain he would accept, and it wouldn't be too bad since they already knew each other so well. Still, she felt shy just thinking about having to face him in class. Then she got a reply from Yuta saying he was glad to hear she was doing okay. Michiru was left speechless by such a bland response. She couldn't believe it. And after a moment of silence, she became incredibly frustrated that Yuta was just brushing off her confession. Michiru angrily typed another message, thinking that all he needed to do was agree. But she was shocked when she received an apology from Yuta, saying he couldn't date her. In that moment, Michiru felt completely crushed and cried out, "Why is this happening to me?" After school, she called Yuta up to the rooftop to talk face to face. He asked what was so important that she had to talk to him here. Michiru told him not to act like he didn't know why she'd called him up, or if that was really how little her confession meant to him. She said the reason was because he rejected her, and she demanded that he explain himself. Yuta was relieved to know it wasn't a prank, and Michiru yelled back, asking how he could even think her confession was a joke. Yuta assured her that he had answered seriously, and just as he'd said, he couldn't return her feelings anymore. Michiru got upset and demanded to know why Yuta had wanted to date her before, since she was now giving him exactly what he wanted. He should be happy. Yuta replied that yes, it did make him happy, but he was sorry he couldn't return her feelings. He added that besides, she was the one who rejected him, so he should be the one asking why she'd had a change of heart. She answered that it was because circumstances had changed, and that anyway, she was the only person he needed to care about. Michiru grew frustrated, but then Yuta said that he had been doing just that. To her surprise, he explained that she used to be the only person he cared about and his sole source of motivation. To him, she was his entire world. But after she rejected him, he realized how narrow his perspective had been, and that it turned out he had a lot of people who had been supporting him this whole time. It was thanks to them that he was able to get through it and find his motivation again. It hurt him to think that he might never have realized they were there if not for her rejection, and that's why he wants to focus on those people now. He sincerely apologized, but said he just couldn't date her right now. That was all Yuta wanted to say, so he began to leave. Michiru stopped him, saying that he was just angry because she'd been so harsh with him, and if that was the case, she would apologize as many times as he wanted. If only he would reconsider. Yuta said he wasn't angry and that it didn't even bother him anymore, so his answer wouldn't change. Michiru grabbed his hand, saying that wasn't true, asking why he would say such a thing when she was falling apart inside. She wondered how he could be so calm and why he wasn't listening to her like he always did. Yuta asked if she was okay, but she screamed at him, calling him an idiot, insisting that he had always been hers. and asked what more he needed to care about. She wanted him to be there for her when she cried. Yuta felt guilty as he told her to stop. He pushed her hand away and made it clear that he was not her property. Michiru realized this was the first time Yuta had ever raised his voice in anger. She repeatedly apologized and begged him not to hate her. Yuta replied that he didn't hate her, but he didn't love her either, so he couldn't date her. As he left, he apologized for yelling and walked away. Michiru was left sitting on the rooftop, not wanting Yuta to leave her. She tried to reach out, but it was useless, as everything Yuta had said was true. Yuta and his work had been her anchor during tough times. She broke down in tears, wondering how things had come to this, and wished she could go back to the day Yuta confessed to her. But it was too late for regrets now, because after declaring that Yuta could never be a great author and rejecting his confession, all she could do was sit there and cry over her own foolishness. Meanwhile, Yuta stood behind the rooftop door, feeling guilty as he listened to her cry. By the weekend, Yuta was still feeling bad about what had happened that day and remembered Michiru calling him an idiot, declaring that he had always belonged to her. Those words irritated Yuta, and even though Michiru might be an important friend to him, she always wanted others to agree with her. He felt terrible for getting angry with her, so he thought he would have to apologize to her later. Then his mom called out, saying his friends were here. Yuta got up to see who it was and realized Alyssa and Yuri had come to visit. They thanked him for having them, and Yuta invited them in. He remembered the last time Alyssa and Yuri had stayed the night, and now they had decided to visit again today. They both said good morning, and Yuta greeted them back. Suddenly, Yuta's father ran over excitedly, saying it had been a while since he'd seen them. He invited them in and said they were always welcome, which made Yuri and Alyssa smile and express their gratitude. Yuta thought that the two of them had certainly gotten used to this pretty quickly, while his father asked his mother to bring out some tea. His mother replied that there was no need to rush and told Yuri and Alyssa to go up to Yuta's room and wait. However, his father complained that he wanted to chat with them too. Hearing this, Yuta's mother pulled him close and landed a powerful punch to shut him up. Afterward, she apologized to Yuri and Alyssa, telling them they could go up to the room without worrying about being disturbed. Yuta also apologized to them for the trouble. When they got to his room, Alyssa remarked that it wasn't what she had imagined and was actually very tidy. Yuri felt a little nervous, and Yuta told them to make themselves at home. However, Yuta also felt quite nervous since this was the first time he'd had two friends visit his room. Yuri thought that this was the place where Yuta spent his time. Then her foot accidentally tripped on something, and she fell onto the bed with Yuta. He asked if she was okay, and Yuri felt flustered by the situation they were in. Meanwhile, Alyssa was sniffing around the room and said that Yuta's desk, bed, and his entire room were making her heart race, and she was starting to tremble. Yuta asked what was wrong, but she was suddenly overcome with emotion and started crying. She thought this was the very place where he had spent sleepless nights pursuing the creation of the greatest story. Yuta apologized if he was letting her down, but he actually gets plenty of sleep. Alyssa then said that she admired an author who takes care of their health. Yuta told her she was exaggerating, and Yuri commented that Alyssa seemed to be having a lot of fun. She said she understood the feeling but thought Alyssa was treating Yuta like a god. Alyssa replied that it was only natural, but then she remembered him saying they were teammates and corrected herself, saying he wasn't a god, but more like a teammate she respected. She felt very emotional, and Yuta thanked her for her kind words. Yuri smiled, calling Alyssa cute, which made her feel embarrassed. Yuta then invited them to sit down and noticed Yuri was looking at him with a worried expression, so he asked what was wrong. Yuri replied that she'd just realized this was her first time in a boy's room who was her age. Yuta remembered when she said he was the first person she'd ever gone on a date with, and was surprised. He said that she seemed very approachable, so he just assumed she had guy friends, and was surprised to learn the truth. Yuri quickly said that she didn't have any close guy friends, nor a boyfriend, so of course, he was her first. Yuta felt flustered hearing he was her first, and that she just wanted to make that clear. Alyssa, feeling left out, also made it clear that she didn't have any guy friends either. So he didn't need to worry because Yuta was her first too. Yuta felt honored to be the first guy friend for two popular girls. Then Alyssa said he was also the first person to see that scene. Yuta worriedly asked what she meant. Just then, his mother brought tea in for them. Alyssa thanked him for his help the other day and said that thanks to him, she was able to finish her song. Meanwhile, Yuri was looking around the room, and Alyssa invited Yuta to her place again, so she could thank him more properly. Yuri called out to Yuta, and he quickly walked over to her, leaving Alyssa standing there. Yuri said she found a notebook and asked if she could take a look. Yuta agreed. Alyssa asked what was in the notebook, and Yuta explained that he'd been writing short stories in it since he was a kid. Alyssa was surprised to learn he used to write stories by hand. Yuta said he wrote by hand until his dad bought him an old computer. He also remembered how every time he finished a story, he would share it with Michiru. He got lost and thought about it. Alyssa asked if something was wrong, but Yuta said it was nothing and asked Yuri if the story and his handwriting were a mess since he wrote it when he was little. But Yuri was moved after reading it. Yuta asked if she was okay, and she replied that the story was just too touching. Alyssa quickly expressed her curiosity to read it, and as she did, Yuri told Yuta that this short story was a masterpiece. Yuta said she was exaggerating since he wrote it in elementary school, so the story was pretty simple. Yuri was surprised to hear that because the story was as good as Digimos. Yuta was both surprised and happy to hear that. Alyssa finished reading as well and said she loved the story, unable to believe that Yuta had written such a wonderful piece as a child, which moved her to tears. After that, both Alyssa and Yuri told Yuta that he absolutely had to share the story with the world and should post it right now. Yuta hadn't expected them to suggest such a thing, and they both wanted him to do it immediately, if he was okay with it, because this short story was truly a masterpiece, and his fans would love to read his work. Yuta honestly didn't really get it, since he thought it was a story he was embarrassed to have written. But now that both Alyssa and Yuri were praising it so highly, he decided to give it a try. Alyssa and Yuri were happy to hear that, but they reconsidered, thinking that posting it right now might be a bit rushed. They apologized and said he could post it whenever he had time. However, Yuta surprised them by saying he didn't mind, and the story was about 50,000 characters long, so he could retype it all if they gave him about an hour. Alyssa and Yuri didn't object, but they noted that 50,000 characters in 1 hour was a lot. Yuri wondered if he remembered the entire story. Yuta confirmed this, saying that he remembered everything he'd ever written, and he thought that was normal for all authors. Both girls were shocked. They didn't think all authors could be that talented. Then Yuta announced he would start right away. Alyssa and Yuri sat in a formal posture, while Yuta sat in his work chair and opened his laptop. When he started typing, his hands moved so fast that Alyssa and Yuri even saw after images, and his fingers were as graceful as a world-class pianist's. Nearly an hour later, Yuta finished, and Yuri exclaimed, wondering if he was even human to be that fast. They also noticed that the version of the story on his laptop was completely proofread. After Yuta posted the story on the app, Alyssa and Yuri became emotional as they recalled the story's content. They said that this story needed to be adapted into an anime. Those words made Yuta happy, but he didn't think it would ever happen. He recalled what his editor had once said, that the world of professional novels is harsh, but Yuri truly believed that someone would want to publish it as a series. She opened the app and showed Yuta that his short story had already received countless comments. Yuta himself was surprised to see such a positive response from readers in just a few minutes. Alyssa asserted that it was the only possible outcome in his case. At the same time, his editor, Sakudara, noticed Yuta's new post and was impressed with how he could always create an amazing story. Later that same day, Yuta's mother invited Alyssa and Yuri to stay for dinner before they left, and they decided to stay. She told them to make themselves at home and eat as much as they wanted. While Yuta's father was tied up to prevent him from causing trouble, Alyssa and Yuri called Yuta's mother Mom and praised her delicious cooking. Soon, Yuta's little sister, Utako, came home. Alyssa and Yuri were a bit confused, not knowing where she'd been. Utako said she had basketball club practice all day, and that she'd been giving it her all since becoming a regular on the school team. Yuri praised her, saying that was amazing. Then Utako greeted Yuta and praised his new story as brilliant. She was happy to see that Alyssa and Yuri were there too. Yuri and Utako greeted each other with a high five, while Alyssa was a bit shy. Yuta's mother asked Utako if she'd washed her hands, and she replied that she had. Utako mentioned that Yuta's new short story, called I Offer My Heart to You, was so brilliant that her entire class was sobbing. Yuta hadn't expected the story to be received so strongly, while Yuri remarked that it was only natural for a masterpiece. Yuta wondered if middle school girls even read web novels. Yuta's father said that Digimas was so popular because Kimamatsu-sensei's writing was loved by men and women of all ages. Then, he told Yuta to quickly check the new short stories ranking on the trending chart. Yuri also moved closer to look, making Yuta aware of how close she was, the sweet smell of her hair, and how lovely her face was. Suddenly, Yuri gasped in surprise as she let out a loud "wow," saying that the story had reached 300,000 points, and that Yuta's new short story was at the top of the trending chart by a huge margin compared to the others. Yuta's mother asked if that number was a big deal. Yuta's father replied that even hit works big enough to get an anime adaptation would get 20,000 points in a single day at best. And even that rarely happened. Maybe once a year. However, Yuta had reached 300,000 points in just a few hours, which was incredible. Yuta's mother was proud, understanding what a huge achievement this was. Yuta's father was certain that Yuta had already received an offer for a series publication and even shared that he had received 100 invitations for a manga version. Yuta's father wasn't surprised by this and proudly said that Yuta's stories should only be published by their company. He guessed that Sakudaira must have already contacted Yuta about it, and Yuta confirmed that he had. Then Yuta's father excitedly said that he could imagine Yuta's Offer Heart series becoming a best-selling novel, an anime, a movie, and even a live-action film in the future. Yuta's mother spoke up, saying that now wasn't the time and told Yuta's father to be quiet. Then she told everyone to get back to dinner and consider it a celebration of Yuta's success. During dinner, Utako asked Yuta about his plans from now on, whether he was going to continue writing Offer Heart. Yuta wasn't sure, because most of his stories were based on his feelings at a certain moment. And since Offer Heart was something he had written back in elementary school, he wasn't confident he could get back into that same mindset now. All eyes were on Yuta, as they were curious to know if he would continue the series. Then, Yuta's father yelled that he had to do it. Yuta saw that everyone was in agreement, but his mother stopped his father while Yuri said that Offer Heart was so moving she would love to read the sequel, but only if he was comfortable with it. Alyssa shared the same sentiment. And as a creator herself, she thought the story was too good to end there. Utako also said that everyone in her club wanted to read more. And in fact, she was sure all of his fans felt the same way. Yuta was happy to hear that, but he wanted to think about it more. Yuta's mother sensed he was being pressured, so she clapped her hands to get everyone's attention and told them it was getting late, so they should keep it down to avoid disturbing the neighbors. Everyone immediately fell silent, and Yuta was grateful to his mother for saving him from that situation. Then, Yuta's mother told Yuri and Alyssa that if they wanted, they could stay the night, and they both agreed instantly. She went on to tell Utako to lay out the futons in the living room, and the three of them went upstairs. Next, Yuta's mother asked him to help with the dishes, and he immediately agreed. While doing the dishes, Yuta thanked his mother for letting Yuri and Alyssa stay over, and she said it was no problem since they were his friends. Yuta also thanked her for stopping everyone earlier. Before he blurted out an agreement without thinking it through, then he asked his mother if he should continue that story. His mother replied that he should only do it if he really wanted to. Since he hadn't replied to Sakudaira yet, he could still turn it down. She said that what he wrote was his choice, and he didn't need to worry about what others wanted or pay attention to their persuasion. She also made this clear to Yuta's father, and Yuta felt incredibly grateful to have the best mother in the world. Then she told him to think it over carefully, and that she would support whatever decision he made, no matter what anyone else said. With a radiant smile, Yuta thanked his mother for her support, then spent the rest of the evening thinking about it. He remembered the day Michiru rejected him and how everyone around him had supported him when he almost wanted to quit writing forever. They gave him a new perspective and sparked his motivation to continue, which is why he wanted to live up to their expectations. Finally, he made his decision. Besides, letting hesitation hold him back would only slow down his personal growth. First, he messaged Sakudara back, and now it was time to get to work. As Yuta resolved to publish his novel Offer Heart as a series, Michiru's situation, on the other hand, was not going well. Her room was a mess with unwashed dishes and clutter everywhere. And she was wrapped in her blanket thinking about Yuta. Her phone notified her that Kamimatsu had posted a new chapter, but Michiru was too distraught to stop crying and couldn't bring herself to read it. To her, Kamimatsu's stories, or rather Yuta's, had always been her only source of comfort. Ever since her mother passed away when she was young and her father, who lived abroad, barely paid her any attention, she felt lonely and miserable, but Kamimatsu's stories helped chase those feelings away. Now, however, she couldn't bring herself to read them. Because those stories reflected Yuta's mind. If any part of them hinted at an indirect criticism of her, she would feel hated by the work she loved most. So, for now, all she could do was avoid it. Meanwhile, at Nakatsu's house, he had a picture of Michiru on a dartboard and was throwing darts as if aiming at her. Nakatsu sighed, thinking it was time for him to claim her and that he couldn't wait to see a strong girl like Michiru suffer. The future remained unclear as to what changes it would bring to Yuta and Michiru's lives. The next morning, after Yuta decided to turn Offer Heart into a series, Mei came to visit him and wished him a good morning, apologizing for bothering him on a Sunday. She wanted to discuss with Yuta how things would proceed. Yuta also apologized for taking up her weekend. He was impressed to see her coming to work even on her day off, which showed her maturity and seriousness. Mei thanked Yuta for accepting the publishing offer, and Yuta thanked her in return for the opportunity. Mei noticed a few other pairs of shoes and asked if he had guests. Yuta was about to explain nervously, but just then, his mother walked in, greeted Mei, and asked if she was there for a meeting. Mei apologized for intruding on their day off. Yuta's mother then mentioned that it seemed she had forgotten to put away some old shoes and would set them aside to be washed later. Yuta immediately understood that his mom was trying to cover for him. Next, Yuta's mother invited Mei into the living room while signaling to Yuta that she would tell the girls to stay upstairs. Yuta thought that was amazing, because otherwise, it would have been quite a hassle to explain why a famous voice actress and singer was at his house. Afterward, Yuta's mother brought out some tea, and Mei praised Offer Heart, saying it was truly wonderful and had the potential to be loved by people all over the world, just like Digimus. Yuta thanked her and was happy she liked it too, but said he wasn't so sure since competing with Digimus would be tough. Mei asked if he was serious, then showed him the annual rankings. Cool. Yuta was surprised to see that Offer Heart had topped the annual chart. He asked how that was possible when he had just uploaded it yesterday, and Mei replied that Offer Heart had received a massive number of points in just one day. Enough points to match what a highly anticipated anime would get in an entire year. Yuta's mother also found this incredible. Mei explained that the score didn't just reflect reader satisfaction, but also the level of expectation they had for him. These numbers showed that everyone was expecting great things from the author. Yuta felt encouraged hearing that, and his mother was happy for her son. She praised Yuta and said that now that he'd decided to continue, she too would be expecting great things from him. Yuta was very pleased. Although he had hesitated at first, he now believed he'd made the right decision. Then, May started to discuss business and explained that he would need to rewrite the story in a longer format, and shared some other details. He understood that, and then May asked if he could find some time to stop by the editorial department. Yuta asked if there was an important meeting, and she replied that yes, it was very important. Yuta thought that if it was related to Digimas, it must be important. But May continued, adding that it was about an anime adaptation for Offerheart. Yuta was speechless when he heard that and asked if May was joking. May replied that she wasn't and that their company had a good track record of producing anime, so it was easy for them to get proposals. Yuta asked how that was possible since anime adaptations were usually made only after a novel started selling well. She explained that things were different now because Yuta, under the pen name Kamimatsu Sensei, was already known as the most successful author of the century. Not only that, but his work had topped the annual rankings in just a single day, so an anime was guaranteed not to fail. She asked if that was something he wanted. At night, Yuta was thrilled with the offer, but also worried because he had only just found the confidence to continue writing last night, and he was realizing the expectations were immense, which scared him a little because everything was moving so fast. May told him to have confidence in himself, and his mother also encouraged him, saying that having this opportunity meant that people loved his story. They agreed with Yuta's mother and said that both the editorial department and the anime team would support Yuta and his work with everything they had. His mother also counted herself in. At the same time, Alyssa and Yuri had just woken up. Yuta realized that they were right and that he had all these people by his side. So he declared with a smile that he had made his decision and would do his absolute best. Everyone praised him, saying that was great to hear. Utako also overheard the conversation from behind the door and quickly ran to tell Yuri and Alyssa the good news. Afterward, May prepared to leave for the office, and Yuta apologized for taking up her morning. May replied that it was no problem at all, since bringing his work to the world was her top priority. And she said this with her face very close to his, along with a captivating scent. As Yuta and May felt someone watching them, he realized it was Yuri and Alyssa. He was surprised to see them coming downstairs, both silent with what looked like pouting faces. May was shocked to see Yuri and Alyssa in his house and in their pajamas, and she shook Yuta, demanding an explanation. He vaguely explained that there had been a party and he'd become friends with them there. Alyssa stepped in between them and introduced herself as Alyssa Agamasu, startling Yuta as he heard her use his last name. Yuri also gave a small smile and stepped forward, introducing herself as Yuri Agamasu. Yuta, bewildered, asked them what they were doing, and they both asked him back what he was doing and who this beautiful woman was, and why he didn't want them to meet her. Alyssa demanded an explanation and asked about his relationship with the woman, both of them bombarding him with questions, leaving Yuta flustered. May, who had pieced together the situation, stepped closer to Yuta, greeted both Yuri and Alyssa, and introduced herself as Sakudaira May. Then she wrapped her arm around his and said that she was Yuta's wife. Yuri and Alyssa were shocked, while May calmly left, saying she would talk to Yuta later, and blew him a kiss goodbye. Both Yuri and Alyssa were stunned, completely floored by May's mature grace, while Yuta knew he was about to face a barrage of questions from the two girls. Meanwhile, May left his house with a little chuckle. Yuta struggled but eventually explained everything to Yuri and Alyssa, while his whole family giggled at the hilarious situation. Afterward, Yuri and Alyssa left, albeit a little reluctantly, and thanked Yuta's mother for her hospitality. A few days later, Yuta visited May's workplace to discuss the anime project, and he went with Yuri and Alyssa. Yuta remembered that May had also called them there to share some related information and wondered what it could be. They then headed into the building. On their way, they saw a crowd gathered at the entrance, trying to take pictures with someone. Yuri wondered if there was a celebrity there, and Yuta thought it was funny for them to ask. considering they were even more famous. Then they heard the crowd calling someone a prince, and Alyssa wondered who it was. When Yuta looked toward the person, the man himself greeted Yuta as his dear rival, whom he hadn't seen in a long time. Alyssa and Yuri didn't understand what he meant by rival, while the guy in the fancy suit remarked that Yuta was truly something else, walking around with two beautiful girls. Alyssa asked Yuta who this person was, and before he could answer, the guy introduced himself as Prince Hakuba, a light novel author, model, and the son of a tycoon. He said it was a pleasure to meet them, while Alyssa felt stressed about having a conversation right there. Afterward, Yuta entered the building with Hakuba, and as the guy was acting all stylish, Alyssa asked Yuta if he was really an author. Hakuba overheard this and asked Alyssa if she had never heard of him, which was unacceptable to him. Hakuba pulled out one of his magazines, and Yuri and Alyssa realized the face in it matched the person standing before them. Yuta explained that Hakuba-sensei was actually incredibly talented. Being the son of the Hakuba Pharmaceutical Company's CEO, a professional model, and a successful author, Hakuba agreed with Yuta and pulled out one of his famous novels titled Crimson Executioner Grimgold. And both Yuri and Alyssa recognized the book. Hakuba proudly declared that it was a masterpiece that had held the #2 spot on the charts for 3 consecutive years, and that he himself was its author, striking a stylish pose. Alyssa wondered if that pose was really necessary. Yuta told him that he didn't need to compare himself like that, as every work has its own unique appeal. However, Hakuba insisted that he would never give up competing for the top spot. Yuri whispered to Alyssa that Hakuba seemed to have an inferiority complex, but they both found it interesting to witness the intense rivalry between two famous authors. Hakuba was annoyed, feeling that Yuta's words were sarcastic. Yuta clarified that his praise for Hakuba's work was sincere, and that his stories were very interesting. Hakuba thanked Yuta, calling him his rival, and declared it was an honor to be praised by an author of Yuta's caliber. However, deep down, Hakuba felt frustrated that he couldn't achieve the massive success of Digimus's first season, which sold 50,000 DVDs, making him feel like a complete failure. Yuri whispered to Alyssa that Hakuba seemed rather insecure, but they both still found it interesting to witness the fierce competition between the two authors. Yuta repeated that he had told Hakuba many times not to call him a rival, because he wasn't worthy of it. Hakuba thought Yuta was implying that he was a nobody, but Yuta corrected him, saying he meant the opposite. Hakuba admitted that Kamimatsu was the better one, but he asserted that as long as the race continued, the fire in his heart would never die. If Yuta kept moving forward, Hakuba would surely surpass him one day. Yuta could feel the passion in Hakuba's words and thanked him, promising to do his best. Yuta was happy to receive praise from such a famous author. Then Hakuba mentioned he'd heard that a second season of Digimus was in the works and asked if Yuta was here to discuss that. Yuta replied that he was actually here to discuss an anime adaptation for Offerheart. He immediately realized he shouldn't have said that, as Hakuba reacted with a tremble to the news that Yuta's newly published work was already getting an anime. Yuri also said she was surprised to hear the news and didn't think things would happen so quickly. Hakuba felt defeated. Just a few days after its release, Offerheart was already getting an anime despite not even being published as a series yet, which made him realize the true power of his most formidable rival. Yuta asked if Hakuba was okay. Hakuba replied that it was extraordinary for Yuta to have 2 anime series in such a short time, while he was only just preparing to launch his second one at the age of 20. However, Hakuba refused to accept defeat and declared in front of all 3 of them that he was also here to discuss the release of a new series, with the goal of getting another anime launched. Yuta was very excited to read it and asked if it was a fantasy genre. Hakuba agreed and said he had named it Bahamut Slayers, which made Yuta think the name was really cool, and he decided he would buy it when it came out. Hakuba thanked Yuta for his support and said he would also buy Offer Heart when it was published. Hakuba extended his hand to Yuta, and the two shook hands as Alyssa and Yuri watched in admiration. Afterward, Hakuba said his goodbyes, leaving Yuri feeling excited. When Yuta asked what was wrong, she replied that he just looked really cool when he was passionately discussing someone's work, and Alyssa liked that too. Yuta got embarrassed at being called cute, and he asked them to stop teasing him. Yuri said she wasn't teasing, just telling the truth, and that seeing him like that was really refreshing. Then Yuta's father appeared, asking if he was here for a meeting. Yuta confirmed, leaving Yuri and Alyssa confused. Yuta's father calmly replied that Mei was currently in a meeting, so Yuta could wait for her in the conference room. Yuta wished his father luck with his work, and he thanked him, then turned to speak to all three of them. Afterward, Yuri and Alyssa discussed how Yuta's father was so different at the office compared to his usual self, looking completely professional. Yuta just laughed it off, even though he knew full well how much his mother scolded his father. Soon after, they arrived at the conference room. There, Yuta met director Makoto, and she greeted him, saying it had been a long time since the last party. When Makoto asked how Yuta was doing, he replied that he was fine. Director Makoto then said that she had read Offer Heart, and it was wonderful, and she felt incredibly honored to be making the anime for this work. She enthusiastically congratulated them on their new success, but Yuta was confused and asked if she was going to be the one directing the anime for Offer Heart. Makoto asked in surprise, "You haven't been told yet?" Yuta nodded, and just then Mei ran in, rushing to apologize for making him wait so long. Yuta replied that it was okay, because it was normal for her to be busy with meetings. Then Mei thanked Yuri and Alyssa for taking the time to come today, and they both said it was nothing, while also apologizing for what happened over the weekend. Mei laughed and said it was fine and that she should be the one apologizing for teasing them. Makoto curiously asked Yuta what they were discussing, but he pretended to know nothing. At that point, Mei got straight to the point, explaining the reason she had called them in, which was to discuss a promotional episode for Volume 1 of the Offer Heart series. Alyssa and Yuri asked for more details, and Mei explained that they wanted to release a promotional anime episode along with the first volume of the novel. Makoto explained that this promotional plan was similar to social media movie advertising campaigns, while Mei added that they wanted to create a short 15-minute episode to release on their website. Alyssa was impressed by everyone's efforts right from the start, and Yuri was also surprised because this type of promotion rarely happens. The director added that it just goes to show the high expectations for Kamimatsu's work. He reassured Yuta that the team would be the same people who worked on the Digimas anime, and that they would do their utmost to create a masterpiece. Yuta was very happy to hear this. At this point, Alyssa and Yuri began to understand why they had been invited. As expected, everything had already been discussed with their representatives, and now they would be relying on Alyssa for the ending theme and Yuri for the role of the main character. Alyssa and Yuri were both excited and ready to give their all for this opportunity. Director Makoto also declared that she would support Yuta and told him to get ready for the best anime ever. Mei also reassured Yuta, which made him feel more at ease. Alyssa also decided to do everything in her power to let as many people as possible know about his work. And Yuri also said she would do her very best so that people could love Yuta's characters even more. Yuta felt like he was the happiest author in the world, receiving help from so many people. With everyone's sincere support, Yuta found the determination to dedicate his all to Offer Heart. Everyone started getting ready to return to their own work. Meanwhile, Michiru was at a karaoke bar with her classmates, where Nakatsu was singing and attracting most of the girls in the class with his voice. However, Michiru didn't seem to be paying any attention. Nakatsu snuck a glance at her, trying to get Michiru's attention, but she just sighed, telling herself that everything seemed to be going nowhere. Another girl sitting next to her asked if something was wrong and if she had come because things were better now, especially since Michiru had been absent from school for a few days. She told Michiru she could talk to her if something was on her mind. But Michiru thanked her and said it wasn't necessary, as she knew that talking about it wouldn't solve anything. Then she stood up saying she needed to go to the restroom. Nakatsu, frustrated that his singing hadn't attracted Michiru, made an excuse to go out to find an opportunity. The girls started to wonder when they noticed both the Nakatsu and Michiru had been gone for a while, making the situation suspicious. Some of the boys joked around, while the others went back to singing. Meanwhile, Michiru stood in the restroom washing her hands, trying to compose herself. But her mind kept replaying what had happened with Yuta. She silently wished she could wash away her mistakes like the running water. As she stepped out of the restroom, she was startled to find Nakatsu waiting outside. Michiru was surprised, wondering what he wanted, and since when he had gotten permission to call her by her first name, so casually. Nakatsu smiled, asking if she liked his singing, though she acted as if she didn't understand the question. Nakatsu insisted that he had been singing for her. Michiru felt uncomfortable and responded bluntly, trying to keep her distance from him. Michiru didn't want to talk to Nakatsu right now, but he still grabbed her hand and told her she should feel lucky that he was paying attention to her. Michiru, furious, tried to pull her hand away, but he wouldn't let go. She screamed, telling him to get away from her. Nakatsu was annoyed but still said that Michiru was a strong girl. When Michiru asked him where he got that idea, Nakatsu smirked smugly, asking if she liked him. Michiru grimaced, asking why she would ever like him. Nakatsu told her not to pretend, because he saw her staring at him in class, and everyone had noticed it. At that moment, Michiru realized Nakatsu had misunderstood, because she was actually looking at Yuta. She shouted that he was mistaken and that she didn't care about him at all. Still not getting it, Nakatsu told her she didn't need to blush like that and asked who she was looking at if not him. Michiru couldn't bring herself to tell the truth, which only made Nakatsu even more arrogant, declaring that he'd be willing to date her. Michiru protested vehemently, but Nakatsu only tightened his grip on her hand, pulling her closer as he leaned in. Nakatsu wrapped his left arm around Michiru's side, telling her to be honest, that he didn't mind her attitude, but she'd be cuter if she were less stuck up. He said that with his looks and her figure, all they needed to do was walk out of there together. Michiru started to feel scared and yelled that it would never happen. Then slapped Nakatsu hard across the face, determined to get out of this unsafe situation. She screamed that it was his fault, then turned to leave. Nakatsu muttered, wondering why she was so angry. Michiru replied bluntly that she hated him, which shocked Nakatsu, who believed she had been sending him signals. Michiru firmly denied it and walked away, thinking that her life was just getting worse and worse. A few of his classmates approached, asking Nakatsu if he had managed to conquer Princess Michiru. They had helped him by keeping the other girls occupied, but were surprised to see Nakatsu fuming because Michiru had rejected him. Another guy joked that he would now win Michiru for Nakatsu. Nakatsu angrily warned him, telling him to stay out of his business because things had gone too far. Now, Nakatsu was determined to conquer Michiru at any cost. His friends realized Nakatsu was furious because no one had ever rejected him before. His pride was severely wounded. So he immediately contacted a gang, asking them to do the usual to the person whose picture he was about to send. The gang agreed, and Nakatsu smiled wickedly with a malicious plan in mind. A little later, the other girls came over and asked Nakatsu if he was coming back to karaoke, saying it was boring without him. Nakatsu agreed to go with them, and when one of Michiru's friends asked if he had seen her, Nakatsu replied that he had, and that she looked pale, so he had advised her to go home and rest if she wasn't feeling well. Nakatsu patted the friend's shoulder, feigning concern, then invited her to sing another song. In his mind, he calculated that after he finished singing, he would have just enough time to get to Michiru and play the hero saving the damsel in distress. Meanwhile, Michiru was on her way home, blaming herself for going there in the first place. From the very beginning, Michiru had never wanted to see Nakatsu's face again, but she didn't know that danger was waiting for her. The thugs Nakatsu hired had identified Michiru from the photo he sent. As Michiru walked into a deserted alley on her way home, the group immediately approached her, calling out to her with malicious, teasing words. Michiru wondered what kind of bad luck was following her today, as she now had to face two more guys, just like Nakatsu. She tried to ignore them, but they grabbed her arm roughly and said they wanted to have some fun with her. Michiru cried out in pain, demanding they let her go. One of them whispered in a terrifying voice that she didn't have the right to refuse. Michiru screamed for help. But there was no one around except them, their eyes filled with malice. Michiru began to panic as she realized she was in real danger. She silently prayed for someone to come and help her, just as the phone in her pocket began to ring. While on the call with her friend, Michiru was crying and begging for help. Suddenly, she heard Yuta's voice calling her name and saying he had been looking everywhere for her. The thugs just saw Yuta as someone in their way, while Michiru breathed a sigh of relief, though she still wondered why he was here. Yuta gently took her hand, saying her father was worried and had asked him to find her. The thugs yelled, asking who he was to take Michiru away. Although terrified inside, Yuta stood his ground, stating that he was Michiru's childhood friend, and confronting them, asking what they wanted. Michiru asked Yuta why he was here, and Yuta replied that he just happened to be passing by and told her to just play along. Oh, Michiru nodded, realizing that Yuta was scared too, but was still doing this for her. The thugs warned Yuta not to mess with them, since he was just a high school student and should stay away, or they would deal with him. Despite all the threats, Yuta firmly said that he wasn't going anywhere because he needed to take Michiru back to her father. Just then, another person appeared, causing the thugs to freeze in fear because the man looked extremely dangerous. It was Nikawa, who approached with a sharp gaze and an intimidating walk, asking the thugs what business they had with his daughter. The thugs were terrified when they saw Nikawa get out of a limousine, thinking he might be Yakuza. Yuta pretended to talk to Nikawa as if he were Michiru's father, saying everything was fine, and Michiru played along. Nikawa maintained a stern expression, glaring angrily at the thugs. Then Yuta taunted them, asking what they wanted to say to Michiru. The thugs started to think Yuta might be a gangster himself. Seeing the thugs get scared and run away after Nikawa gave them one more threatening look, Yuta breathed a sigh of relief and asked Michiru if she was hurt anywhere. Michiru replied that she wasn't, but she was still shaken from the experience. Yuta thanked Nikawa for playing along, praising his convincing performance. Nikawa replied that he was happy to help and was glad that his friend was unharmed. Michiru suddenly remembered that Nikawa was the scary man from the other day. After that, the group got into Alyssa's limousine, and Nikawa politely guided Yuta and Michiru to their seats inside the car. Yuta invited Michiru to sit down first, and she politely did so. After a few minutes, Yuta asked if she was feeling any better, and Michiru nodded, thanking him for his help. However, she wanted to know how he had found her. Yuta explained that he and the others were stopped at a red light when he heard Michiru's voice. At first, he thought he was imagining things, but he still decided to get out of the car to look for her. Michiru was surprised to learn that it was just a coincidence, but she still didn't understand why he had helped her. Yuta was confused, so Michiru added that after everything she had done, she didn't think he would help her. Yuta told her not to think that way, because they were still friends. Michiru suddenly realized that Yuta was always there for her, not because he was Kamimatsu or anything else. He was still himself, kind and unchanging, which made her feel guilty for bothering him so much. Yuta told Michiru not to say that, as he was used to helping her. She retorted that his comment was a bit rude, and he quickly apologized, saying he was just kidding. Michiru felt better, realizing it had been a long time since they had talked and joked like this. No matter how much she thought or worried, she couldn't deny that she was still in love with him. Then, Yuta apologized to the two with him for making them wait. Michiru suddenly remembered they weren't alone and was confused as to why the other two were there. She realized Nikawa was Alyssa's bodyguard and silently wished they didn't have to be here. Yuri apologized to Michiru for not greeting her right away, saying she didn't want to interrupt their emotional moment. Michiru replied that it was fine, and Yuta thanked them for their concern. He asked Alyssa if she could give Michiru a ride home, and she happily agreed. Nikawa also complied. Yuri suddenly remarked that she never expected Yuta to be brave enough to jump out of a car like that to save Michiru, calling it heroic and admitting it made her a little jealous. Yuta said it was all thanks to Nikawa, and Nikawa commented that Yuta was very brave as well. Michiru began to feel like she was in the way, realizing clearly that Yuta had only come to help his childhood friend. Michiru tried to stay calm, fighting back tears as she sat and listened to the cheerful conversation between Yuta, Alyssa, and Yuri in the car. She just remained silent, nodding along and trying not to show any emotion. When she got home, she replied to her friends' messages, telling them she'd arrived safely. Meanwhile, Nakatsu was furious when the gang he'd hired refused to get involved with Michiru anymore. They even blamed him for not telling them anything about who that girl was. He furiously kicked a trash can and walked away, filled with resentment and hatred for Michiru. A few days later, Yuta went to the editorial department to meet Mei. She thanked him for finishing his work, which allowed them to print the first volume of Opera Heart. Mei couldn't help but be amazed that Yuta had written 350 pages in just 3 days, a pace she called monstrous, because other authors usually needed a month to write that much. Yuta explained how efficiently he had worked to get the manuscript done as soon as possible. In any case, Mei was very happy about it. Moving on to the main topic, she explained that light novels require illustrations and that they needed an artist for Opera Heart. Yuta understood the importance of this and was asked if he had anyone in mind. Mei smiled, saying they had the budget to hire anyone he wanted. Yuta said that as long as it had illustrations, he would be happy, since he was still just a newcomer in the field and couldn't ask for much. Mei then changed the question, saying she actually had a candidate in mind and asked Yuta if he knew Misayama Ko. Yuta replied that he didn't. And Mei explained that Misayama was a VTuber and illustrator with over 2 million subscribers on her channel, and that her art was brilliant. Mei wanted to know if it would be okay for them to invite her to join the project. Misayama was indeed amazing, and Yuta said that if Mei thought so, then he agreed too. Mei found his reaction a bit lukewarm and asked if he was really a high school student, yet didn't know much about VTubers. Yuta replied that he was, and Mei figured it was fine as long as he agreed. Yuta then asked if Misayama was really as admirable as Mei claimed, and if she would even have the time to take on the job. Mei replied that it wouldn't be a problem because Misayama had actually been the one to proactively ask to join. Mei added that Misayama had presented her case with great passion, showing she was definitely a huge fan of Yuta's work, which made him very happy to have an illustrator who loved his story. Mei then showed Yuta the designs Misayama had sent, and Yuta was blown away when he saw the character designs for the Opera Heart series, along with a potential cover illustration that Misayama had created without even being asked. They also mentioned that Misayama was very picky about her work, so seeing her pour so much passion into Opera Heart was truly exciting for them. Yuta felt grateful that such a famous artist was willing to do all this for him. Mei then asked for Yuta's opinion on accepting Misayama's passionate offer, and Yuta answered sincerely that he would love to work with her, because her art was amazing and she genuinely cherished his work, which would surely lead to a great result. The following weekend, Yuta agreed to meet Misayama in person. However, when he arrived at the station, he realized it wasn't an ideal location, because it was too crowded on a weekend and a cafe would probably be a better option. He decided to text Misayama and suggest meeting at a cafe instead. Misayama replied immediately, saying she was also looking for him but couldn't find him, so she agreed to meet at the cafe. Yuta decided to head to the cafe quickly and briefly recalled her enthusiasm, especially after the announcement of the Opera Heart novel adaptation, which had created a storm on social media. Mei had been thrilled with the fan feedback, with people saying that a talented author and artist were collaborating on a god-tier project. Shortly after, Yuta received a message from Misayama, feeling she was quite enthusiastic. But he also owed her a meeting and was curious to see what she was really like. So he wanted to meet her. And that was the reason for today's appointment. As Yuta walked toward the cafe, he came across a girl who was muttering to herself. As he approached the cafe, he noticed a little girl with silver hair, blue eyes, and a cute style, who looked like she was a foreigner and probably in elementary school. The little girl was trying to talk to people, but because she was muttering, no one could understand her, causing her to look around in confusion. Yuta recognized that familiar expression. It was just like the look on Utako's face whenever she got lost. So he walked over and asked if she was okay and if she was lost, but she seemed scared when she saw him. Yuta felt worried and wasn't sure what to do next, until he noticed her phone case had a picture of the main character from Digimon. He immediately asked about Digimon, and the little girl nodded nervously. Yuta asked if she liked Digimon, and she nodded again in agreement. Yuta breathed a sigh of relief as she slowly began to open up. He realized the Digimon picture she had wasn't drawn by any artist he knew, and his gaze made her wary again. Yuta quickly said that he also loved Digimon, and that the main character, Ryo, was really cool, which made the little girl smile and nod repeatedly along with what he was saying about Digimon. Then she took out more pictures of Digimon, and Yuta could clearly see she was a huge fan, which helped break the awkward atmosphere. He took the opportunity to ask if she was trying to find her way somewhere. She nodded and pointed toward the cafe at the north gate. Yuta said it was a coincidence since he was heading there too, and he could take her. The little girl's eyes lit up with joy, finally getting some help, and Yuta was happy he could help her. Suddenly, she loudly expressed how lucky she was today, making it hard for Yuta to understand everything she said. He also wondered why an elementary school girl was all alone in such a crowded place. He then asked her why she was going to that cafe and if she was meeting someone, and she nodded. Yuta mentioned that he was also meeting someone there, then suddenly wondered if he had kept Misayama waiting too long. Yuta checked his phone to see if he had any messages, and when the traffic light turned green, he crossed the street with the little girl. However, she seemed afraid of walking on the crosswalk. This reminded Yuta of how Michiru was also afraid of crossing the street as a child, so he knew that at times like these, it was best to hold the little girl's hand and reassure her that he'd be right there with her. The little girl blushed as Yuta held her hand to cross the street, then mumbled to herself, wondering if this was what people called love. Soon, they arrived at the coffee shop, and the girl thanked him for his help. Yuta smiled and said it was no problem, then asked if she could see the person she was waiting for. She looked around, confused, as it seemed the person hadn't arrived yet, and Yuta didn't want to leave her alone. He suggested they wait together, which at first made her happy, but then she shook her head, worried that Kamimatsu-sensei might get the wrong idea. Yuta asked if she was sure she didn't need him to stay, and she nodded. He reassured her that he'd be nearby if she needed help, then went to find the answer to Misayama's message. Meanwhile, the little girl was, in fact, Misayama. And she thought about how cute Yuta was. Exactly her type. She imagined how wonderful it would be if Kamimatsu-sensei were someone like him, and just stood there, looking shy and flustered. Yuta gave her a strange look, wondering if she was really okay. Yuta decided to message Misayama-kun-sensei and got an immediate reply. She said she was standing at the entrance and asked where he was. Yuta looked around, thinking she must be older than him since she was a famous artist, but he didn't see anyone other than the little girl he'd just guided. He decided to text and ask what she was wearing. Meanwhile, as Misayama-kun was looking around, she accidentally bumped into Yuta and nearly fell. Yuta quickly caught her and asked if she was all right, apologizing for not paying attention. A grateful Misayama-kun bowed her head in thanks, her face flushing. Then, Yuta saw her phone fall and picked it up for her and realized the chat on her screen was between her and himself. Figuring out that this young girl was none other than Misayama-kun-sensei. Misayama nodded in confirmation and, looking flustered, asked if he was Kamimatsu-sensei. Yuta replied, "I am." And the girl immediately exclaimed with embarrassment that this was the best day ever because she got to witness a real-life rom-com. That was how Yuta first met Misayama-ku, the famous VTuber and illustrator. When he hired a famous illustrator like Misayama-ku and agreed to meet her in person, he never imagined she would be the same cute girl he had just shown the way to the cafe. Yuta saved a seat at the station and told Misayama-ku they should find a quiet spot to talk. They chose a quiet corner, and when he looked at her, he noticed she was staring at him quite intensely. Misayama then said she couldn't believe her favorite author had appeared like a knight in shining armor to help her, and that he was young, gallant, and exactly the type of person she'd want to marry. Yuta only caught bits and pieces and didn't understand what she was muttering, as her voice was too soft and hard to hear. He noticed she was quite tense, so he told her to calm down because he couldn't understand what she was saying. Misayama apologized for being unclear, and Yuta felt relieved that she at least understood him. He introduced himself as Yuta Ajamasu, and Misayama nodded in confirmation. To avoid any mistakes with her name, she wrote it out, introducing herself clearly as Misayama-ku. Yuta complimented her, saying her name was very nice, which made her blush with embarrassment. Yuta suggested they get to the main topic and called her sensei, but Misayama interrupted, asking him to call her by her name. Yuta didn't mind, so he started calling her Ku, which made her heart race, feeling as if they had become very close. Yuta said she could call him whatever she liked, and Ku called him Kamizama, meaning God. Yuta smiled, but suggested she call him something a bit more normal. Misayama-ku thought of calling Yuta Kami-sama, meaning big brother, but Yuta reminded her he wasn't actually her brother. She then switched to Kami-ni-sama, which meant both big brother and God. Yuta didn't say anything more and instead praised her art, saying he found it impressive that she was already an illustrator at such a young age. Yuta said that he also used to write stories in elementary school, but compared to him back then, Misayama was a true professional. Misayama shook her head and revealed that she was only 15 years old, which surprised Yuta because he thought she was even younger. It turned out she was only 1 year younger than him and was a high school student. Yuta couldn't believe she had achieved so much at her age, being both a VTuber and a famous illustrator, truly a master of two arts. Misayama blushed as she listened to his sincere praise for her detailed drawings and the covers she designed, all of which were highly professional. This made Yuta very happy, knowing that someone like her loved his work and wanted to work with him. Misayama got so flustered, her heart was pounding so hard that she accidentally hit her knee on the table, spilling tea on her hand. Yuta stood up worriedly and asked if she was burned, but realized that luckily it was iced tea, so her hand was fine. He gave her his handkerchief to wipe it off, and Misayama blushed so hard she almost fainted, feeling like everything was just perfect. She couldn't believe she could be so easily flustered. Yuta tried to help her snap out of it, and after about 10 minutes, she came back to her senses. The two continued to talk about Digimaz and Offerheart, and over time, Yuta found it easier to understand her. When it got dark, they left the cafe, and Yuta asked her if she had any plans afterward. Misayama said she wanted to go shopping, but was terrible with directions. Yuta decided to go with her, and Misayama was very grateful. The two of them started walking to the shopping district, where Misayama stopped at a store selling merchandise of famous anime and manga characters. Misayama Co. went to the store mainly to find souvenirs for Digamas. Yuta thought that, even though she was only 15, she acted as adorably and enthusiastically as a true fan. Ko picked out a newly released acrylic keychain of the character Momo from Digamas, and when he saw how much she liked it, Yuta bought it for her as a gift. Ku was overjoyed to receive the gift from him and asked if he was sure. Yuta smiled, saying he really wanted her to have it as a thank you for working with him. Ku jumped for joy because not only did she like the character Momo, but she also simped for her cute appearance. Watching her, Yuta could see how much Ku truly loved Digamas. which made him even more confident that by working together, Offer Heart would become a fantastic piece of work. He resolved to keep writing, while Ku was still muttering to her Momo keychain. She even thought about auctioning it off since it was a gift from the author himself. But when Yuta called out to her, she immediately got embarrassed. Yuta felt this was a good time to say goodbye and hoped to see her again soon. Ku hadn't realized how quickly time had passed. Yuta told her that if she needed feedback on her illustrations, she could contact him anytime. Ku felt shy, realizing she'd been having so much fun that she'd forgotten they were supposed to be working together. Finally, Ku confessed that she was very shy around people, but was grateful she'd had the courage to seize the opportunity to work with him. Yuta smiled, finding her adorable and feeling happy to have such a special partner. Ku was overjoyed to have met Yuta, and Yuta was also happy to have made a new friend. He said he was looking forward to seeing her again. Ko couldn't contain her joy and impulsively hugged Yuta, which made him a little embarrassed in public. Realizing this, Ko apologized, then took Yuta's hand, declaring that she would do her best on the illustrations for him and become the perfect wife. Although he didn't hear everything she said, Yuta could feel Ko's determination, so he reassured her that they would both do their best together. Yuta waved goodbye to Ku, thinking to himself that while he was unsure about the meeting at first, Misayama Ku turned out to be a much more pure, cute, and kind person than he had ever imagined. After this meeting, he believed he wasn't the only one who felt the potential of this collaboration. As time went on, June came to an end, bringing with it many memorable events. Yuta thought back to when Michiru rejected him, and then suddenly realized that he was surrounded by so many people who always supported him. He also made many new friends he never thought he deserved to have. With that support, his life as Kamimatsu was about to enter a new chapter. One day in July, Yuta's father was moved to tears when 3 stunning beauties gathered at once, endlessly thanking Yuta for making him so happy by bringing 3 celebrities home. He was proud to have raised a son who attracted so many girls. Meanwhile, Yuri and Alyssa treated it as normal, while Ku was baffled, unable to believe that Creature was Yuta's father. As usual, Yuta's mother got angry with his father, then hit him and tied him up. Yuta's mother warmly welcomed the girls, apologizing for the trouble her husband caused. They just laughed since they were used to it, but Yuta wasn't sure if that was a good thing. He turned to ask Ko if she was okay, but she was lost in thought, wondering if she could really become his wife with such chaotic parents.